Right. Close meeting of the Hartford Select Board order at 6 p.m. on Tuesday, September 1st. Let's volunteer to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Close this portion of the Hartford Select Board's reopening as the Liquor Control Board. So the board's rules for Cherry Hospitality Group. There's no packet. Any questions or discussion?
I'd like to recuse myself.
Let's go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I read this through and it's just a minor thing, I think, but the address for this is Clubhouse Road for Roger Terry. And the Clubhouse Road I know doesn't exist anymore, so is that supposed to be Quincy Main Street? I don't know how long it's been Quincy Main Street, but it's been a long time.
Since the 911 changeover.
20 years ago? Yeah, okay. That is all.
So this looks like, sorry, Dan, this looks like, at least for the third class, you can renew it. You can pay for the renewal installments. So the first part of it, when they got it, was when the vetting was done. Okay, sounds good.
It's probably an auto fill that's on that one. If you want to form like Catchment either at the state level or the individual applying, but it would be good to note that to them just so they're aware it should be updated. Thank you. Good catch. Any other discussions or comments?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to move that we approve a renewal for Perry Hospitality Group of Vermont doing business as the Queechee Inn at Marshland Farms, Queechee Main Street, Queechee, Vermont, 05009, 00059, third class.
Second,
Second?
Joe, any further discussion or comments? None will call the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I excuse myself. So we have 5 in favor and sorry, I'm the same. Cameron, you're saying or accusing? I repeat. I accept. Thank you. And I'll close this section of the Liquor Control Board and reopen as the Hartford Select Board. First is to consider the reappointment of Windsor High State Energy Commission. This is a reappointment, so questions or comments? Dennis, go ahead.
Thank you again. I've known Lynn Bohai for a long time and I have zero problem with this application at all. But I would like to say, I really feel that applicants, even re-applicants, should fill out an application. It might be from a previous application. But my feeling is that new members probably may not even know who this person is, much less not know what they're up to. So I really think we should have an application. I don't have a problem in the world with Lynn Bohai, and I'm very pleased that she's applying for this. But I think we should see applications.
Questions or comments? Yes.
I'd like to make a motion. Appoint Lynn Bohai, a 3-year term for the Energy Commission, expire 9/24/2024. Correct. 3-year term.
Second,
Second?
Mike, further discussion or comments? Now we'll call the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous. Thank you. Dennis, keep that thought in your head. Put that on the agenda probably in March.
Okay.
Time. Okay. But don't lose that thought. It's a good idea. Thanks. Okay, up next, order of agenda. Question or comments and discussion there. Yes.
Not a question on the agenda, but I do have a question. This is the legal So there will be public comment after each of the presentations this evening, or how is,
Yeah, we'll have it after after they do the presentation. Public comment about those specific updates.
2 presentations or after each individual?
We'll see how they want to do it. I'm not really sure.
I think we were prepared with some questions for folks after the police and fire presentation, and then we would kind of wrap that item up and take a break. And then open up that second item, and there's a memo, and then have some questions and some comments, so we can compartmentalize each topic.
Sir?
Anything else? Okay, let's turn it over to fire, police, emergency services. Thank you.
I just lost my Wi-Fi, so we're gonna let this go up, but I just wanna thank both Brad and Scott for being here. Scott just gave me his numbers, 26 years with Hartford Fire. We've got Brad at 28 years with Hartford Police. And I have to say, I've worked with a lot of police chiefs, fire chiefs, captains, deputy chiefs, so these guys sit in the top 5 after all these years of public service. So I am really pleased to be working with them, and excited to be presenting to everybody today, you know, what it looks like when you call 911 when one of these folks comes to see you. And I'm getting my Zoom link back up as fast as I possibly can, Scott. So also, when
I'm trying to use my phone as a hotspot, but that's not.
I just came back on, so it should.
looks like I'm still there. Just gonna share my screen. Oh, can somebody see a TV? It says that I don't have screen share access.
She needs screen share. Oh, she needs screen share. Okay. Just take them.
Can you put my screen share?
Still on. Oh. Sorry about that.
There we go.
Because
We're gonna start the screen share.
yeah,
You got it?
you got it.
I need one move, so I know how to do that. All along the path.
Sure.
It's not just a matter of turning it on or something.
I don't think so. I think so.
You can give it a shot, Dennis, but I know that we were starting to make the connections over there.
Oh, just that. This came in.
That was a magic touch.
Awesome, well, glad that all worked out, and thanks for the invitation to come and sit before you again. Major Vale and I sat down and kind of collaboratively put together the presentation, so there's gonna be a lot of back and forth during the presentation, and we hope that the questions come that way as well. But I'm gonna start out, let's see, starting with our first slide in the packet is just a brief overview of the fire department organization as it stands today. This is our organizational chart. Obviously, the fire chief sits there at the top. Underneath me, we have an administrative assistant that takes care of ambulance billing and all the those kind of services within the department. She also assists the fire marshal with the processing of all the permits that come through. Fire Marshal Tom Peltier, we hired him a couple of years ago. Has been working in that full-time role as the fire marshal for the town of Hartford.
And underneath him, he has a part-time deputy fire marshal who used to be the full-time fire marshal, working for him in the office 3 days a week. We also have a deputy fire chief who's in charge of operations and the training of all the full-time staff and the call staff. Then you have the operations section of the department, 4 rotating shifts, a captain, a lieutenant, and 3 firefighters, all trained as either an EMT or a paramedic that work rotating shifts of 24-hour periods for the town. Those shifts work a 24-hour cycle. They get a day off. They work 2 days off. They get a 24-hour secondary cycle and then 4 days off. And that progresses throughout the year, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And that is the basic structure. We also have a call force of part-time firefighters. Those are members and residents of the community that wish to participate in fire and or emergency medical services that can join the department, take a short exam, and then we can train them locally to either the firefighter level or the EMT level so they can practice with the department. Typically, they get assigned one of the full-time shifts to work with. So they'll come in and work alongside staff up to 24 hours of paid time per month to kind of supplement the shifts. And that is my basic overview.
Next up is the police department organizational chart. A couple of slides from here, I do have like a basic responsibility chart. The rudimentary organization here is the chief of police position up top, the deputy chief and the administrative assistant. They all form the administrative services portion of the department. Underneath that, you have the field operations or the patrol division and the support services division. In the patrol ops division, there's a lieutenant's position. The police social worker is also included in that. It's an adjunct position. It's included under that operational division. And then there's 4 squads, A Alpha 1 squad, we call them A Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, and Delta squad. Each squad is on a rotating basis. They are 12-hour shifts. Again, it's 24/7, 365 coverage. Each squad consists of a sergeant's position, a corporal's position, and 2 patrol officer positions. Over on the support services side, you have a criminal investigation division or the detective division, and that's led by a detective sergeant. And then there's detectives under him. There's 3 detective positions. One of those positions is the Siu Detective, which is funded predominantly by the Windsor County Special Investigative Unit. Then we have our Emergency Communications Center. It's also a 911 PSAP, a public safety answering point for the state of Vermont. That's led by the communications manager. And under him, there are 8 communication specialist positions. And we were put in for an ISC position, which was approved 2 years ago. We haven't filled that yet. So that position also falls under that. He also has 4 part-time dispatchers that work for him. And again, I do have a couple of slides from now. You'll see more of a breakout of responsibility, which each division is responsible for.
All right, so this slide demonstrates what a firefighter does. Sometimes the term firefighter, although the descriptor doesn't really define what they actually do. They're probably more accurately described as an all hazard responder, because that's the kind of emergencies Hartford responds to. So we have to train each and every new hire to all these separate disciplines because they don't know what kind of emergency they're going to encounter. So a firefighter that comes into the department is trained at the hazardous materials, operations level, and decontamination. And we do that to both support operations that might involve hazardous materials within this community, support our mutual aid partners, but also support the state of Vermont's hazmat team should they be deployed within town. In fact, they were here at UVAC this weekend doing some training, and we were supporting them during their training operation. So they're trained at the hazardous materials level. They're all licensed either advanced emergency medical technicians or they're certified at the paramedic level, which is the highest level of pre-hospital medical care that can be delivered. I believe we have 9 on the department now, and we have 1 that's looking to go to school for that. They're also trained as rope rescue technicians. We do a lot of different responses in this community with the Quechua Gorge and some other areas in the community that have difficult access and require those kind of trainings and skills to kind of support any kind of rescue that might occur. They're also trained for water rescue. We're obviously surrounded by a few rivers and streams, and we also deploy to other regions of the state through an agreement with Vermont Emergency Management to supply water rescue technicians and responders. Just during this past year, we had these few storms come through. We actually deployed teams down towards Bennington and that area in support of emergency management's deployment plan for providing those kind of rescue resources throughout the state. And then finally, obviously, everybody's certified at the firefighter level to do interior structural firefighting and any other kind of firefighting operations. Some other specialties we've been trained at, and if you get a chance to visit the fire department, I suggest you do. Right after 9/11, there was a lot of ramping up of what local agencies could do to support, acts of terrorism or other those kind of events. And the town was a beneficiary of a lot of FEMA funds that came in to support that. We have a big heavy rescue unit at the Hartford Fire Department, fully paid for by the Department of Homeland Security, that does trenching and shoring, water rescue, building collapse equipment, and those kind of things to be a regional area and townwide response. But all fully, although purchased by Homeland Security, they're fully owned by the town of Hartford. So we also train our personnel in both trench, confined space, and building collapse rescue.
So again, on our side, we have communications. Our communications specialists are either CS1s or CS2s. They all go through a rigorous communications training program through APCO. All of our patrol officers are level 3 certified. We do not employ any level 2 or level 1 certification officers for liability and other reasons. We do offer we have bicycle patrol. The 2 officers are certified mountain bike patrol experts. We also have a school resource partnership with the school. We do a lot of community events going in the schools. As you can see, we have Detective Sean Fernandez up there reading to the kids at the school. And we do a lot of investigations with a lot of our partners that we work with through like Vermont State Police, the Drug Task Force, our own investigations in the criminal side of things here in Hartford as well. And then this is a bigger responsibility chart that's broken down for which each division is responsible for. So up top under the administrative section, you can see we have policy, research, and planning. We're going through the self-assessment portion of CALIA accreditation, which is a pretty lengthy process. We also have professional standards, which is internal affairs, doing the internal affairs investigations as well, in line with that policy, research, and planning to make sure everybody's following the policies and we have the best policies out there. Under our administrative services assistant, she handles the fiscal and management side of the house to include the grants, the records, and all the personnel records. She also oversees our volunteer services, our police chaplain volunteer position and our fingerprint position. So we do have fingerprint services that we provide to the community, and that is all done on a volunteer basis. He is not employed by us. Under the field operations, you can see we do recruitment and outreach. We have a sergeant that is doing all of those duties for us right now. Logistical services, which include, the procurement, the scheduling. We have to handle the fleet management. The facility maintenance comes under that. The weapons armor comes under that. And the event, Homeland Security and event planning comes under that as well. Also under that, the patrol section, that includes the K-9 patrol and the school officer resource partnership. We don't have a dedicated SRO, rather we have a partnership where each officer adopts 2 schools. They attend the extracurricular activities at those schools and they complete their foot patrols and visits to the school during the school day. The police social worker also falls under that. We're in the process of getting another police social worker. As you know, Whitney Husong has left and moved out of state, but that falls under that category as well. Under the support services division, we have the major crimes that are investigated along with the Vermont State Police. If there's a real major crime, they come in and assist with that. But we also have the Windsor County Special Investigation Unit. So we have that one SIU dedicated detective, which handles all the special investigations such as sexual assaults, the child abuse investigations, and those sort of investigations. They also handle the sex offender registry checks here in town. Then we partner with the Southeast Regional Drug Task Force. When we were fully staffed, we did have a detective that was assigned to that. We since had to pull him back due to staffing issues. And we also have an adjunct position of a crime analysis position through the Vermont Air National Guard. It's a counter drug analyst that is there with us now. We're also responsible for all the evidence and seized property in our evidence room. The CID sergeant oversees that with assistance from one of his detectives. We handle all the education and training on that side and liaise with the police academy. And then there's a technical services portion for all our equipment. We have to maintain that, like our mobile data computers and our body and in-car camera video and all our special equipment that we have to use. And then on the emergency communications center side, they have all the reporting through the state, the VABers and UCR reporting. They have to get all the stats up to the state. And then they go through, also they have the APCO and Spillman training piece of the house that they do, and they oversee our Spillman records management system.
Okay, a little bit more about other operations that occur within the fire department, but Brad did mention accreditation, and I should have mentioned that at the start. So Hartford Fire has been participating in the accreditation process since 2004. In 2019, we did our most recent application and assessment from the peer assessment team and received our 4th accreditation as an accredited fire department. And as of just recently, we were the only fire department in New England to be accredited. And now we share that honor with the city of Hartford, Connecticut. So we both share the same namesake. So anyways, we talked about a little bit about the operational side of the department and the response side, but the other part of what the fire department does is the proactive approach to prevention throughout the community. And we do that through both the building and construction process. So any public building that resides within the borders of the town of Hartford is inspectable by the fire department through the fire marshal's office. That's where new construction takes place. Permits are filed with us. It's a fee-based system. But we do this under an agreement with the state of Vermont. So the state of Vermont is where all the rules, statutes, and come from for enforcement of the building and fire and safety code. And we, through an MOU, exercise those rules through the fire marshal's office here in Hartford. And that gives us the ability to receive the fees locally for doing those inspections throughout the community. So proactive approach is doing those building inspections throughout the community. That's new construction as well as all the multitude of rental properties we have throughout the community. The other part of that is general public education, and the shifts participate that on the shift level. So all shifts have a public ed firefighter that goes to the elementary schools and actually does 5 to 6 sessions a year of K through 5 education. We teach everybody's learned how to stop, drop, and roll and those kind of things, as well as general safety practices and just good general safety lessons that we do with the kids, and also those touch a truck events and things like that. But we also do some adult safety kind of instruction, stop the bleed training. We do a lot for the school program, CPR, BLS, first aid, and AED, automatic external defibrillator devices. Like we were here a few weeks ago and we heard about how the lifeguards at Lake Pineo were able to defibrillate someone back, had a successful recovery out in Fiji with an AED. So that kind of training we do. We also do fire extinguisher training for businesses throughout the community too that want to learn how to use fire extinguishers and those kind of things. All in all, the fire marshal's office is doing over 700 building inspections a year of existing and new construction projects throughout the community.
Scott, you also do car seat installations as the parent of
Yeah,
a
it
child.
was on the list.
I just want to put a plug out for
Yeah,
that.
we do have 4 members of the staff that is quite a rigorous training program to become a certified car seat installer. And we have participated, we have 4 members that do car seat safety checks.
So if you're watching, don't install your car seat yourself unless you're sure. Just come down and see Scott and some of his folks.
Right,
and
we-
they'll hook you up.
We do, and we do that in partnership with the family place. Oh, we have one more for me? Okay. All right, partnerships, since
I just had a quick question
Oh,
for
absolutely.
you, because you mentioned all the building inspections and everything in the community.
Mhm.
So do we cover like towns that don't have like a dedicated fire department, or they don't have, do we provide these services for other towns that are around us?
inspection services or emergency response services?
I guess both.
So no on the inspection service.
Okay.
So we contract directly with the state fire marshal's office to just do within the borders of Hartford.
Okay.
For that agreement. The state fire marshals have regional offices throughout the state, and it's their obligation to provide those services. to those
Gotcha.
communities. As far as emergency response, there is, let me get the number wrong, but there's 26 member towns that belong to the Upper Valley Mutual Aid Association.
Okay.
So within that agreement, we agree to share like services between our communities. Because the truth is, with 5 guys on duty, you don't have enough to fight a fire, to do anything very technical. So we really rely on our regional responses. When Hartford has a structured fire, we automatically bring in the resources of both the city of Lebanon and the town of Hanover, because they're our 2 neighboring full-time departments to deploy hopefully 14 to 15 firefighters to actually start the operation. But if it's anything bigger than that, we bring in mutual aid from all over the area.
Do we pay fees for that or receive fees from towns that come as well, or do we just all?
We do not. We
Okay.
just agree to share those like services in the future.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Sure. Question, Scott.
Are we, want to let them finish their?
Yeah, if we can, I think it makes more sense to finish the presentation and have all the questions at the end, and they'll probably answer some of your questions before we get there.
Partnerships. So we can't do our job by ourselves. We partner with lots of different agencies and involve ourselves with many different agencies, both statewide and locally. Do want to touch on, we do have some mandatory requirements as an emergency service organization. We do have some mandatory responsibilities set on us by state law. One is to be a baby safe haven for emergency drop-off points. We are a baby safe haven if that were to happen or somebody wished to give up their child. I think it's within the first 30 days. No questions asked. We do have mandatory reporting obligations to the state. Both child and adult abuse and neglect reporting need to be reported if we suspect it during either a medical event or a firefighting operation. We also do have the duty to report anyone who appears to, in our best judgment, be a danger to themselves or others. But we do partner with lots of different organizations. The Department of Forest, Parks, and Recreation is where I get the authority to become the town's fire warden as well, which is separately managed through the Department of Forest and Land. But they provide the guidance for wildland firefighting and those kind of things. We work with the Department of Children and Families in many different areas from both the reporting side and others, and adult protective services as well. I have a great engagement, as you can imagine, with the Vermont Department of Health, since we just are currently dealing with the pandemic and COVID. We played a role in that by providing EMS providers to both do COVID testing and COVID vaccinations throughout not only just the town, but through the region. We're part of their response protocol. So if somebody in the community needs to be COVID tested and is non-ambulatory or can't get out of the house, they're dispatched through the Department of Health, and we'll go to their residence, do the swab, and deliver it to Mount Scottney Hospital for testing. So that part is what we've partnered with throughout the pandemic. Hartford Community Coalition as well. We were with them a lot. Most recently, I scooped a lot of ice cream for the block party.
You chose the wrong flavor.
I know, like everybody wanted maple walnut, and apparently that's the one that I had picked. So I did a lot of scooping. Let's see, Dartmouth Hitchcock. So we operate statewide under Vermont EMS rules. So how to do emergency medical services is set by state protocol through the Department of Health. Dartmouth Hitchcock is our Catchment Level 1 Trauma Center, and they provide our medical direction. So there is a physician at DHMC that's directly connected with us and does our quality, helps us with our quality assurance and how we treat patients in the field, and it helps us deal with the continuity of care of how we're dealing with people. Partner with the Hartford School District. We meet monthly, typically with them at their safety meetings throughout the district. Of course, we partner with the Department of Veterans Affairs here at the White River VA Hospital. We actually have a partnership with them on the municipal fire alarm system. Of course, we do with the Hartford Area of Commerce, Scotney Hospital, the VNA services throughout the community, HCRS, through their social service agencies, the Coochy Club, most of Hartford's boards and commissions at some point. And of course, we mentioned earlier, the Division of Fire Safety, part of the Department of Public Safety, is where we do the fire inspection services. Yeah, you're welcome.
So as Chief Cooney said, it does truly take a village to raise a child. It takes a village to do our job. You'll see a lot of overlap here with our community partners. We are mandatory reporters as well for a lot of these things. We partner with HCRS. That's where our police social worker position comes from. They also have a crisis team. So if we have a call with somebody that's experiencing mental health crisis and the police social worker is not on duty, we will call the crisis team and they will come out for that. We also work with restorative justice. They provide us with mediation services. They also, we can use that as an alternative to send cases through them with the permission from the state's attorney, so it does not have to go through the court system that way. We work with the Haven for the unhoused population. We do community outreach with them as well. They also with us for some of the drug outreach as well. The Turning Point for our overdose outreach, they work with us. So if we handle a call with an overdose and it's non-fatal, they will come out and they will provide services right there on the spot. We work with the Special Needs Support Center for the individuals in the community that have potential disabilities or have those special needs. Headrest is pretty much along the same lines as Haven, how we partner with them. The Hartford Community Coalition, we partner with them. They do our drug take-back days with us. Again, I was at the Black Party scooping ice cream and I chose the right flavor. I had vanilla, nobody wanted that one. They all wanted the maple walnut. We also partner with WISE, which is the Women Information Services Network. So they will come out for domestic disturbance situations and they get more in depth. They get more in depth with that, how they do what's called FEDI interviews, they're forensic interviews that they can do after the fact for the domestic assaults. And a lot of the times that'll lead to patterns of abuse and further charges come out. So it's a really good organization there. Windsor County State's Attorney, they are the ultimate law enforcement authority basically in the county that oversees all of our criminal prosecutions. We work with the school district as far as our school resource partnership. We're also on their safety committee. Probation and parole, we have to work closely with them. When individuals are on probation and parole, we deal with them. They will come out and assist us with a lot of that.
Can I interrupt just for 1 second?
Sure.
We're getting a lot of comments about the audio. That's what you're working on, James? Okay, thanks. Sorry.
Am I too close? Or? Better? Okay. We partner with the Division of Children and Families. Obviously, if there's family needs there, they will come out and assist us. We also serve on their child protection team. We work with court diversion. The local health officer will go in and assist him. He'll assist us with a lot of the health hazard investigations. And then lastly, we work very closely with the fire department, other local area police departments, DPW, and planning and development. Everything kind of intersects as we do our jobs in the community.
This gives you a snapshot. So this is a call volume chart, and I think it's probably self-explanatory. So we have been experiencing quite an influx of emergency response requests through the fire department for both EMS, fire, and all other brands of kind of emergencies throughout the community. And I think we saw that some of our population increased over the census evaluation. I think it probably didn't capture the influx of people that actually moved here during the pandemic. Which was the impetus for part of doing the Station 2 study that we'll talk about in the next slide or so. But right now, we've seen a consistent increase in calls for service for both fire and EMS calls. Now, fire is a general term. It means, yes, something burning, but it also means anything that was not an ambulance call for the most part. So all investigations of fire alarms, smoke detector activations in a home, a smell of something burning, just unidentified odor in your home that you want investigated, carbon monoxide calls, all those kinds of traffic accidents that don't have somebody injured, those kind of things, fuel spills, hazmat, all that kind of stuff falls into those fire categories. But the blue line indicates medical calls and the orange line indicates the fire emergencies. We're projecting a dramatic increase this year. So you can see that we're way over the line for our 2021 projected, and that's based on the average calls per day. And so we're expecting a pretty significant spike this year overall.
And I put up a graph here that goes back for 2017, so I based it on the past 4 years. I did not include 2021 in this chart. As you can see, we're also steadily increasing with calls. The past year, 2020, we were at 8,716 calls. A lot of those are proactive calls, and a lot of those are calls for service that come in. I did not do the breakdown on that. I just wanted to show that we do have an increased call volume as well. A lot of that was brought on, if you want to flip to the next slide, Tracy, please. A lot of that was brought on by the societal changes due to the pandemic as well. As you can see, the increase in mental health calls that we've had over the years. Now, during that breakdown on those, for instance, 2020 had 234 mental health calls for service. Of those, our police social worker was at 108 of those. 2019 had 176 calls. Our police social worker was at 137 of those. 2018, there was 187. And again, our police social worker was at 97 of those. And 2017 was 157 and our police social worker was at 108 of those. Now, what that means is if the police social worker is not on duty overnight, when we have to call the mental health crisis team, they will come out. Or if it's not significant enough to have the crisis team come out, we'll make a referral for follow-up where the police social worker will go and do the follow-up. Because of those mental health calls, we've also changed our policies dating back to 2017, where if somebody's in mental crisis, instead of bringing them to the police department and putting them in a holding cell, that's no place for them. We will bring them directly to the hospital. And that, by virtue, has increased the fire department's calls for service as well, because partnering with them, they're the ones that do the transports for us to the hospital. And that often sometimes entails having a police officer ride in the back of the ambulance with them for safety reasons or following behind them. So I just wanted to put those stats up there to show what drives a lot of our calls. We also had several overdose calls and a lot of drug use calls that were on the increase over the past few years as well. And factors that drive that are not only the pandemic, but the amount and readiness of availability of those drugs to our society.
Just to dovetail on him, can you skip to the next one? I'll come back to this one too. Actually, one more. So Brad was talking about the statistics involved and who we're seeing, who we're transporting. This chart kind of outlines on the emergency medical side what we're responding to the most. And this is data for three years, 17, 18, and 19. Just to show you an example. So you can see on the chart, trauma is typically the highest calls for service, for emergency services. So that's one trauma, that's falls, that's injuries, soft tissue injuries, those kind of things. But you can see substance abuse and behavioral emergencies, total, over 600, probably close to 600 calls in those three-year period. Altered mental status is what AMS is. So that can be a combination of many factors to include metabolic problems such as diabetes and things like that. But we're seeing a broad stretch of different medical emergencies. But the only one that really stands out in this chart is the trauma, which would make sense as being the primary response type for ambulance services. And you can,
Go back, you wanna go back to,
yeah, age range, yeah, we might as well stay with statistics on
Alright, there you go.
Station 2. So this is just shows a statistical chart, excuse me, of who is using the service. And you can see the highest users of emergency medical services within our area is the 61 to 70-year-old range, where we're frequenting calls for service. And that holds from about the 51 age up to the 90 percentile of who's using the services the most. But you can see there still is a high incidence between those 21 to 50, and I would only assume that that would fall into the trauma category as well. They're seeing us for the most part. All right, I'll end with Station 2, the Station 2 study. So back the fall, winter of last year, I made a presentation to the then board about the increase we were seeing perceived as a result of the pandemic and people moving into the area, and the calls for services increasing in Quechee, and also just a grander look at how do I, as the fire chief, try to deliver an equalized service and response time throughout this entire community, because everybody's doing their fair share as a community member. How do I get them their services to be more equal across this pretty wide geography of a community? I was fortunate enough to have another physical fire station in Quechee, although it did not have living quarters. It was a 2-bay garage. We installed a living trailer for 2 individuals. So when the fire station is staffed at 5 individuals on duty, a supervisor, and 2 in Station 1, and then 2 employees at Station 2, we're able to provide, at least for the first 911 call that comes into this community, a reduced level of response time, more equally balanced across the community. And we're seeing some pretty decent effects for that. Out of the first portion of this study, we were able to staff the station in Quechee about 74% of the time. That's from February 1st when we began the study to the end of the fiscal year, June 30th. About 126 calls we recorded in that time period, where statistically it was very significant, 5 minutes and 44-second reduction in response time out of the primary fire station. I had a couple examples just recently I wanted to share with you. So just the other day during the storm, the Mid-Vermont Christian School was struck by lightning while it was full of kids for the day. The fire engine arrived out of Hartford Station 2 in Quechee within 5 minutes of the 911 call reporting the lightning strike. The backup engine coming out of the main fire station arrived 13 minutes after the initial call. So there's significant reduction in response. And just the other day, we had a trench collapse at the Quechee Club. They're installing an irrigation line for the ski lift system, and they were in a deep trench, about 8 feet deep, and about 1,000 pounds of dirt collapsed from the wall, entrapping an individual, requiring rescue from the trench. The ambulance arrived on scene within 5 minutes from the secondary station in Quechee, and the main fire station was able to get there with a second ambulance 11 minutes after. So significant. And especially the initial crew was able to reach right in and pull this guy out of the trench. So it was successful rescue attempt. Right now, the study is really allowing me to only use the personnel I have, obviously, and not all shifts are staffed at 5 all of the time. Everybody gets a day off. Everybody gets to be sick. Everybody gets personal time. So the only way I can maintain staffing to some point is driving it through the usage of overtime. So the shift's open and we have the capacity within what's allocated in the budget to support it through overtime. we've been allowing overtime so I can increase the opportunities of Station 2 being open, because I think it does serve a need. So we've been doing that through overtime last year. So we are seeing increased usage of expenses of overtime. It definitely was not budgeted when I created the budget and presented it to you, but we're finding ways within the budget to reduce other areas in order to support what I think is a benefit for the community. And that's all I have, and we're happy to answer questions.
Perfectly, sir. Can we get more heat? Not quite the heat I was referring to.
I don't know,
Can mess with the thing.
it changes rapidly depending upon the number of people that are in here.
Kim says she's willing to take a look at the HVAC system, and I'm gonna let her do that.
The AC is working.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's definitely working, AC.
Any questions?
I've got a couple of questions.
Yeah,
Dan, if
go ahead,
that's
Mike.
okay.
Yeah.
First is about the Station 2 study, just so I understand. Is this like a study just to see if this is feasible as an ongoing thing, or is it planned to keep this Station 2 like in service, or?
It's an excellent question. I think some of that lies in what the decision of this board will be moving forward, is that they want to increase that level of service to the Queechee area.
Gotcha.
Because it doesn't exist currently. So to study what, the intent was to see what the impacts were, both financially and what the actual numbers of reduction in response time is going to look like.
Right, yeah, and that's very good info. I mean, it does seem that the reduction in response time is pretty impressive.
Yeah.
For responding to a fire or something like that. And I guess just the other question is sort of more broadly for both police and fire. It's just looking at the call volume and whether the staffing levels have sort of grown commensurately with the increase in calls.
Ours have not.
Okay.
I came to the board in 2017 when the department was staffed at one shift of 5 personnel and 3 shifts of only 4 on duty.
Yeah.
And the board authorized the increase at that point when the calls were at that level. I think we were behind, honestly, I think we were behind the 8 ball then when we did it. We probably needed to do higher staffing.
Yeah, and I mean, besides whether or not it grew sort of in the same range, is the current staffing sufficient, or is there a reliance on overtime, or are there certain services that aren't being provided because of the staffing level?
It's difficult now. I have 2 members that have been on extended medical workers' comp.
Yeah.
So those shifts automatically need to be backfilled all the time. And then trying to support keeping Station 2 as open as I can. I mean, I can't fill it. With the overtime I'm offering, I can't fill it all the time because the members just can't keep up with it.
Sure.
I think one thing to keep in mind is we'll never zero out overtime because
sure.
we have to have both of these departments staffed 24/7, 365. So somebody takes a personal day because their kids graduating from college, we're gonna have to pull somebody else in, which means they're already working full time, we're gonna pay them overtime. But Brad, I don't know if Brad got a chance to tell you his staffing woes, but he also is kind of his crew is tired.
Yeah.
Right. So we're allotted department-wide, we're allotted 34 positions, and that's 23 sworn positions, 11 civilian positions. That includes the civilian side of the house, includes the administrative assistant and the dispatch center. Currently, department-wide, we have 8 vacancies. So the chief's position is vacant, the lieutenant's position is vacant, we have a sergeant position that's vacant, and 2 officer positions that are vacant. Now, mind you, obviously, the promotions come from within generally. So if you promote one to a sergeant, then you have to backfill it. So that creates a vacancy. The SIU detective position is currently vacant, and that's the responsibilities are being shared by the 2 detectives in there now and the detective sergeant. There's a dispatch position that's vacant, and then that information systems coordinator position that we haven't yet filled. So there's 8 department wide. Now, of that, we currently also have 1 officer on administrative leave. We have 1 detective that was pulled to fill patrol, and he is out on light duty. He should be coming back here next week because he injured his foot. We The one individual that we just hired is currently in the academy, and once he comes back here next week, he goes back again in October for a period of 16 weeks, and then he has to do 14 weeks of field training. So he will not be solo patrol and on his own until about probably next July. And then we're currently onboarding one right now that we just hired from another agency here in Vermont. He is full-time certified. So he should be up and running through his field training, that since he's a Windsor County certified, well, he's certified in the state, but he's currently working in Windsor County, another Windsor County agency. So he already knows the familiarity of the paperwork system through the state's attorney's office. He just has to learn our geography and our procedures and our paperwork system. So he should be up and running on his own, hopefully by the end of October, beginning of November.
I know, I mean, I have questions, I know Lanny has questions, but, sorry, I have questions, Lanny has questions, but I think because this format is designed as a listening session, that we should definitely invite and welcome comments and questions from the public. Would that be appropriate? I do have one hand up on Zoom, but also if there's anyone in the room that has questions or comment, feel free to go to the microphone and introduce yourself, your name and where you live. But since there's no one up there, do you want to take the, oh, go ahead.
I was figuring out who's gonna go first. Yeah, thank you for the presentation. Is it in the packet?
Sorry, can you just state your name and town of residence, please?
Oh, sure.
Thanks.
Yeah. Excuse me. All right, I'm John Hall, and I live here in Hartford. Is the presentation going to be available? The slides we just saw? Yeah.
Yeah, we added a couple of slides, or we added a few numbers, but as always, the agenda packet is available on hartford-bt.org. It's a little complicated to find. Go to agenda and minutes, click down and click through. We'll have a new website in the spring. It'll really be easier for y'all to find these documents at that time.
Yeah, some of the bottom text was hard to see. So I have a million questions, so I will not ask a million questions. I'll just ask a couple. You mentioned the drug overdose and use calls that you get.
Yes.
And I was just wondering what kind of the typical outcomes of those calls would be, like once the officer engages the person or people, what usually happens next?
Well, hopefully it's not a fatal overdose. Obviously that turns the investigation into a different manner. If it's a non-fatal overdose, we do have the turning point that we reach out to, and they do the overdose outreach. So they visit the person afterwards. They bring the overdose outreach kit that they have, which includes Narcan, and they provide a bunch of resources to them, and they try to get them into service. We also are bound by the Good Samaritan Law. So if you're calling 911, we're not going to go there and make an arrest because you were trying to save somebody's life. Our first responsibility to the community is to save the life and to try to get those people services.
And the officers, are they not trained to administer the kit if it isn't?
Oh, yes, they are.
Oh, they are.
All of our officers are trained to carry Narcan. They each, we have a allotment from the Vermont Department of Health, and each officer has 2 on their person. And we have an ample supply to replenish them as needed. Some of the officers will even leave Narcan there at the scene for them, but the overdose kit, since everyone knows that addiction is it's hard to get off. And so they try to, in that kit, they have the Narcan that they leave there as they're trying to get them the resources that they need.
Yeah,
Okay.
typically that's a collaborative response to, the law enforcement's not responding solely to an
Right.
overdose. There's an ambulance typically dispatched, and sometimes even a fire engine, depending on the scenario. But the paramedics are there to render aid and treatment and transport to the hospital if indicated and wanted.
Yes.
Awesome. Last question, the police social worker, I was wondering, are there, just from your experience, would there be any like disadvantage in terms of coordinating that care and service if that social worker were in a different department, say part of like a wellness department, if we have one?
I don't know as there would be a disadvantage. It's the advantage to having the police social worker just to be able to respond to those calls where needed is the benefit to the community. And I'm not opposed to having whatever shop that comes out of, just as long as they're available to respond. We do have, like I said, our current police social worker has resigned. She moved out of state. We're working with HCRS to get that backfilled now. And they're looking to what they call a QMHP, or as a qualified mental health professional. Not only did Whitney provide those social services, but those individuals, sometimes they rise to the level of needing involuntary commitment for a period of 72 hours. And the qualified mental health professional has the ability to write that mental health warrant. All the officers are trained and can write that warrant to do so, but it's a lot better coming from the social services that provide that.
And is that backfill process kind of moving along, or is it?
I'm
not
hopeful
sure?
that it's moving along. I had a meeting right after Whitney left with Kate from HCRS, and she said she was going to put it right out. I haven't touched base with her to find out where in the process that is, but I can do so.
Thank you.
Other questions from the room?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hello, y'all. My name's Sean Elsis. I'm from Bethel, Vermont. I was wondering since you're solo staff, do you have emergency response team members within the community that have FEMA training that y'all call upon?
We do have relationships with many different agencies, to include like the State Urban Search and Rescue Team and the State Emergency Operations Center as well. So if Hartford was ever drawn down to the level where we couldn't handle anything more, we reach out to the State Emergency Operations Center with those kind of resource requests. And then they have the ability to coordinate what agencies are going to come in and help us. So there's a plan in place for those kind of scenarios.
Well, I asked when I moved up here in 2011, somehow the state found out that I have a lot of certificates in emergency response.
Mhm.
So they called me when the hurricane hit. So I was wondering if they had community members.
They do. They have I believe I'm going to get them wrong. There's lots of acronyms when it comes to FEMA stuff. But I think it's there's a CERC team, there's a Citizen Emergency Response team that is available throughout the region. And you can apply usually through the Vermont Emergency Management Department. And they can get you in touch with the CERC, which provides that level of assistance I think you're referring to.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hello, Becca White. I live in White Junction. I had a technical question and then a broader question. So I'll start with the broader question. So I'm always intrigued by the number of 911 calls we've gotten and how that's increased over time. And a conversation we had as a board when I was on the select board with Chief Caston was the concept that if you know your community or you know your neighbor or you feel comfortable having conversations with folks or lending a hand in a proactive way, you could see a reduction in folks turning towards 911 is like the go-to. My neighbor's music is too loud, pick up the phone instead of I'm going to walk over and say, hey, could you lower it for your graduation party? So that's kind of my question is, in both of your experiences, yes, there are certain like medical necessary, you want that kind of response, but what do you feel that there are 911 calls being made that we could redirect in other better ways that could be prevented? And what would the community need to do to make that happen? Just a softball.
Wow. That's a softball.
Wow.
Wow. So yes, there's more we should do. I'll tell from the emergency medical services perspective, I think is where I'm going to drive this from. So we get a lot of 911 responses that are people who are stuck in the system or stuck in the perpetual loop that can't break free right away. This is somebody who's experienced maybe a sudden disability, a sudden level of addiction, or those kind of things. That really their only direct point of contact that they can get services from is the 911 system, because they know when they call it, they're going to get somebody no matter what. And that's how that works. And then once we recognize that that's starting to happen, we start to bring in the other services. So at Whitney, we used that Whitney for that a lot because she was a direct connection through HCRS to try to get services to come to this person's home and try to meet the needs that they weren't meeting. Some barriers to that are people don't want that right away, right? A lot of it's a personal decision that I can't do for myself. That's a hard one to get through. And sometimes they don't want to give up that autonomy of, this is my house, I live here, I don't need anybody to assist me right now. So we'll return and we'll come back for another 911 call and another 911 call. And it is a process to educate someone that they need help in other ways. And that's kind of what we've been using the social worker system to kind of help us through, because it would become a consistent loop where we would respond somewhere, treat an individual, even transport them to the emergency room. And unfortunately, these people are using the most expensive service that's out there to get healthcare, which is an expensive ambulance ride and an expensive treatment in an emergency department, when they actually probably need a more social response to getting them out of that loop into a better health and welfare situation.
And just to echo upon that, 911 is designed for emergencies. And as Chief Cooney touched on, not everybody calls 911 has a true emergency. Just to give you some figures for the fiscal year of 2020 to 2021, our PSAP answered a total of 18,581 911 calls. Now, out of those, it's broken down even further. We have what's called catchment area calls. So those are calls that come into our 911 center that are supposed to serve this area. So out of those numbers, the catchment area calls consisted of 10,816 calls. The other PSAP calls answered by our PSAP. So in other words, you can busy yourself out if you're a 911 operator. So if you're sitting in one of the other PSAPs and you're on another 911 call, you're automatically busied out. So your calls will be transferred to the next available PSAP center. So the other catchment area calls answered by our PSAP was 6,022. We also answer out of state calls that get, for whatever reason, they get, like if you call on a cell phone and you're in Lebanon, New Hampshire, that could wind up in our PSAP. That was 1,716 calls that they answered. And our own catchment area calls that were not answered by our PSAP that got bumped to other PSAP calls were 995. So you can, and I've got these numbers going back to 2016, and back in 2016, the total answers were 14,658. So you can see they've steadily increased over the years. So a lot of that begins not only with providing education, for using the service, but also, as Chief Cooney mentioned, getting the appropriate services out to the people so that they don't call 911. Because quite often you will have, individuals that need heating assistance that will call 911. So there's many factors that do go into that.
Thank you. Yeah, I think you made.
Oh, I just want to, kind of think about too, when someone calls 911, they're giving us their best impression in that moment and the dispatcher is interpreting not only the words that are coming out of their mouth, but their tone, possibly a history on the address thing. And we would hate for somebody to say, oh, I'm not going to call 911. It's just loud music on a graduation party. And they walk into a domestic violence situation and they end up in a call that someone's not at the capacity or has the ability to respond to. So some of the things that we do have to keep in consideration is we're asking a lot of our dispatchers and our residents in that moment of time to make really complex decisions. to use an example from, emergency medical, it could be like, oh, we just bumped our head. Oh, we're just gonna go over it's and that. And then all of a sudden it's like, we actually need a full ambulance. We made the wrong call. We need more there than we did. And so that's a really fine line for communities to make that decision around is asking their dispatchers to suss out the situation. When oftentimes people are panicking in their voice and then their tone and they're not really sure what's going on. So that's a hard thing to think about as we ask them to make those decisions.
Thank you. Then my only other general question was, we had impact fees at one point to help cover some of the fire inspection related stuff, if I'm correct. But we don't have those anymore, and now it comes out of just the general budget for fire?
Yeah, so impact fees did exist up until 2016 within the fire department. They were a small fee that was tacked on to new parcels or transfers of land. But impact fees are very specific in what you can use them. They weren't supplementary funding for the fire department. There were rules that required those funds to be used for new initiatives or there was very specifics. And then in 2016, when the town manager presented it to the board and abolished the practice of impact fees, that those were.
Yeah, I just bring that up if there are board members wondering what other funding sources there were for these types of services. I think that while we found at the time impact fees weren't something we wanted to continue with, I think there are unprecedented situations that we're experiencing now. So, thank you.
You're welcome.
We have 2 Zoom hands currently. Do you want to go to that next?
Sure. Yeah, thank you. Oh,
I saw movement out
Did
of the
anyone-
corner of my eye. Was it? Sorry.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess this is for either one of you, primarily for the fire chief, but the fire marshal, when he goes out to those inspections, I understand he's mostly concerned with building safety things, but does he also check for zoning permits as well? Or is he strictly concerned with the building and life safety aspects? We have a lot of, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. We have a lot of permitting processes within town of Hartford. And I'm just curious if the fire marshal is doing anything to see if those permits are in place, or if there's, or if he bothers to check that or not. I'm not sure how that filters through from our zoning department to you folks.
Sure. We're not involved with every permit application that comes through the planning and zoning office because it may not qualify as one within our jurisdiction. But we are notified of all of them through an internal process, internal controls within the town. Anytime a permit is issued out of the zoning office, a copy of those permits go to the fire department. So we can review and see the applicability of whether or not the fire code would be needed in that specific instance. So when he is doing these inspections, that's typically already happened, is that we've already collaborated. In fact, there are monthly meetings with planning and zoning and the fire marshal to discuss new plans and new developments and new applications that are coming in for permit.
So if he goes up to a structure and looks for a permit and it's not there, what does he do?
I'm not sure typically he is looking for the zoning permit, because typically it's there, or we're aware that it's already happened, so it's not something he's typically asking for. Now, there's usually visuals there that might cue him in that one doesn't exist because of the typical big red P you see issued by the zoning and planning, and he might question why that was not up or why that was not present. I don't think it's in his regular checklist to evaluate whether zoning and planning have a permit.
He can't enforce those permitting requirements. He can only enforce building.
Fire and life
Fire
safety
and
code
life
by the state of Vermont. Yeah,
Okay.
that's
Thanks, sir.
his area. Yep.
Thank you.
I mean, should we keep going with public or should I ask my questions?
Let's, I don't care. What would you prefer?
Let's go
Let's go
to
to, yeah.
public. Marcy Bartlett has had her hand up for a while. Can you bring her over?
Hello.
Yes, go ahead.
Hi, this is Marcy Bartlett from Wilder. Thanks for taking my call. I had two questions or two things I wanted to ask about. On the first one is on the slideshow, something referred to Adult Protective Services. Could someone speak to describe what that is and how it's used?
Yep, I think I had it on my slide, Marcy. It is related to our mandatory reporting duty for if we encounter elder or adult abuse in the field. They are the agency that receives that complaint and then would mitigate when we've reported that incident.
Okay, so this is not a program of, for example, if an adult with dementia is missing, how that could be handled within our EMS and how to get people to help find a person who's missing or has gone off grid or whatever.
No, that is totally separate. That would be more of a search and rescue operation of what you're defining. Adult Protective Services is the state agency involved in the protection and welfare of adults.
Okay, is there the capacity within your department to create a profile if there are people within the town who are residents? If a family member wanted to submit a profile for so-and-so in the event of, so that info was more at the ready if it was needed?
Yes, no, it is. The town of Hartford is fortunate enough to have a very robust computer-aided dispatching system that both plugged into both police and fire. It has the ability to store the data that you suggest for both the physical property. So the data we enter in the system can either follow specific properties or it can follow individuals.
Okay,
So
that's
that
good to know.
ability to store that information is there.
I appreciate knowing that. Thank
Firstly,
you.
I'd just like to add too, that's a service provided through the Special Needs Support Center who I partner with.
Okay. It's a good resource and I think would be reassuring if perhaps the public knew a little bit more about it, or it was more spoken of more freely. When you hear of someone in our overall region who's missing, elderly, et cetera, and resources are galvanized to try to help find them, bring them to safety. Those are things that could be useful for the public to know about more fully.
Correct. And we do have a link on our website to the Special Needs Support Center where you can fill out the form that will provide all that necessary information. They get it to us. And as Chief Cooney said, it gets entered into our system. And that includes not only the physical aspects of the individual, but what their disability is and like various things like what could trigger them and how best to respond to them.
Okay, thank you for that.
Also, Laura Perez, the executive director of the Special Needs Support Center, who's fantastic. Laura, if you're out there, we so appreciate your work in the community. She really also champions this as she does her programming and is out in the community letting people know that they can reach out to us, and we will make sure that we're aware of anything that we need to know when we go on a call.
Thank you. My second question has to do with the staffing that our police department's experiencing. How is there progress being made on recruiting new officers? And subsequent to that, I am interested in knowing when our officer on admin leave might be coming back.
Okay, yes, so there is progress. As I mentioned that we had just filled one slot with a full-time certified officer, and we had filled another slot with a non-certified officer who will be going through the academy. We do have a robust recruitment and outreach portion there that we've just started offering hiring bonuses as well. We're working on a recruitment video. So there is much progress that we're moving towards in that aspect. And regarding the officer on administrative leave, I'm hopeful that he'll be back soon. However, that's still going through the necessary process through investigation.
Thank you for that. You know how I feel about him. He's a fantastic officer.
Everybody loves him and his dog Dozer.
Oh yeah, he's like part of the family. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcy.
James, can you bring over Kathy Melisick?
Hi, this is Kathy Melisick in Wilder. I'm thrilled to hear from Tracy that we're gonna have a new website in spring. This makes me so happy. And what Becca brought up is some issues about who, what, where to call.
Did we lose you, Kathy?
Kathy,
Hello? Am I back?
You're back.
That was weird. I don't know how much of that you lost, but I'm thrilled that maybe on the new website, we could have a resources link for these kinds of things. I'm really happy to know we'll get a new website. I'm also happy to hear, happy is a relative word, but I'm happy to hear that Hartford police carry Narcan. My understanding is that Lebanon police do not. And there have been issues with that recently, particularly around the library. So, more power to people in Hartford for harm reduction, by their carrying Narcan. That makes me even prouder of Hartford. And the last thing is just to offer a thank you. There's a question that came up in the chat about what numbers people should call if it's not a 911 type of thing, like loose animals or non-emergency. And I just put in there that I've called the 295-9425 number and said this is a non-emergency. And I'd like to offer a compliment to Agent whoever who was the dispatcher. I asked their name so I could compliment them, but I got an agent number. I have had to call the non-emergency number recently separately for the fire and police, and their response was it was perfection. It wasn't, there was no grandstanding, anything. They just took care of the two issues. And very professional, and I appreciate it. So if that helps, if someone could provide for everybody here the number to call for a non-emergency, that would be great. I know it's on the website. And thank you.
Thanks, Kathy.
Any
Any
more?
others? Yeah.
Maybe bring over Bethany.
Bethany, you're on mute, we're told.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your presentations, Bethany Fleischman, Hartford Village. Thank you for your presentations. It was great to hear all this. And I really appreciate the efforts to do more around social work, especially in the police department. I do, though, a couple things. One is having lived here most of my life, I don't really know how you even would be able to reach the police social workers. I've spoken about this at a different select board meeting. I didn't call 911, but I was in a situation, I was with people and someone called 911 on someone who was in a bad mental health state, and police as well as ambulance showed up. And I think police made the situation worse just by their presence, because people were, it made people scared. And so in those situations where I think that, the person who called was very clear that, we just needed someone to help figure out what this person needed. And I would have thought that we would have had the social worker or someone like that arrive instead. And so I'm a little unsure about when that happens and how we can get social workers to appear instead. I also would be always very reluctant to call the police in a situation where someone is having a mental health crisis, because I've just seen that happen where it was the police who showed up. And I just think that people often get really freaked out in those situations, and it makes things worse. And then the other thing is I would just like to speak in support of having more mental health first responders and maybe a separate wellness department, because I think, there's just confusion around who will arrive when you call 911. And I think reluctance on many people's part to call. And also a lot of, more than anything, just like an incredibly huge amount of unmet needs, which I think we all know about in the community. And so it ends up that 911 gets called when really people need other stuff. And I just think a wellness department would be really great. And also just better information, so we know who would show up in different situations and how to get various assistance that's not necessarily police. So that's all. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Bethany.
Another one?
Sure.
Can you bring Paula Melfi over?
This is Kathy Melisick and Wilder. I just got a note to unmute, but I'm all done.
Okay.
Bring Paula over. And Kathy, can you lower your hand, please?
Oh, you should be good to go. Paula, maybe you're muted, so check to see if you're muted, Paula.
But not, I think she lowered her hand too. Okay, so now the only hand I see is Doris.
Let's try Doris.
No, this is Kathy. I just keep getting messages to unmute. But really, I'm done. Thank you.
Okay, so Kim, did you have a question? Then we'll go back to see if there's any in the room.
Sure. Okay, yeah. I'm really delighted to have this opportunity, and I think it's something that I've been thinking about for a long time. And it's, you know, I want to start with just the comment about the non-emergency number versus 911 because I at one point did call the non-emergency number just for concern for someone's welfare near my business. That sort of typical could happen sometimes. And I was instructed by the dispatch person at that time, this was a couple of years ago now, that like, no, you should call 911. And I think it was for part of the data tracking or whatever. But so I'm delighted to hear about Kathy's experience and that worked well. So it'd be interesting to get a sort of a formal opinion on how okay it is to call the non-emergency number. And I think that relates directly to goals that I have shared, and I've shared with Mr. Cormier as well about the idea for considering the structure of our public safety department in general. I think as a nation, we have, and as well as in Hartford and other areas, come to rely so heavily on police and law enforcement officers to respond to every kind of situation and circumstance. And it's not, you know, I think that such an admirable job has been done in trying to fill that huge, vast need, but that it is more of a burden on law enforcement officers, particularly armed law enforcement officers, to have to serve every single need. And I'm curious, so I guess I do have some questions, but I think I'll keep it more general in the sense to just ask how receptive you are. I've brought up a number of times this model that's right in Vermont, the Howard Center's community outreach team, which they have a group that is more than one social worker or more than one social worker and a peer support, peer
support
advocate. Basically, it's a little more robust first responder response team that does work in collaboration with law enforcement and certainly EMTs. You know, I mean, I think the fire department and EMTs are a brilliant organization, and I'm not opposed to law enforcement, but I am opposed to things like, you know, officers in uniform with guns at things like speaking engagements or community events or in schools or those kind of things. And so I'm curious as to how receptive our public safety department is to exploring a little more holistic approach to our first responding.
Wow.
And I could be more specific.
Okay.
This is not new. This is something, I mean, I
don't
hope
mind
that.
taking a crack at it. I think we all know that 911 systems there to back it all up. That's the insurance policy. If something's in failure, if something becomes dangerous, those kind of scenarios, 911 is there, and those services are at anybody's pleasure within the United States. There are certain obligations, I think, statutorily that we have to figure a way around, right? If somebody calls 911 call, there's only certain agencies that can respond to that. So if there was crisis lines, hotlines, for those that don't fit the emergency need, then I don't think that there's any opposition to creating more crisis intervention, those kind of things. Just as long as the blanket, the security blanket of 911 is there to back up those kind of things.
Can I give a quick example just of, for example, the group in Shelburne that does it's called community outreach, and I have it up here. They have they've offered to come and present to, I'll backtrack a little for anyone who hasn't heard this already, but I learned about this group when I was at a VLCT conference in Montpelier, and I was at a table with 2 officers from the Shelburne area, and we were talking about this concept, and they were highly supportive. They were really complimentary of how much time and money this group has saved their town and their department. And this is funded through, in part by the Howard Center, and then in part by surrounding towns. So in theory, we could explore something within the core town, the Upper Valley. But they have one of the slides in their presentation is, when to call this number and when to call 911, when to call the emergency 911. And it would be like, concern for someone's well-being, but not life-threatening or not. And to put that, like Rebecca's example of when to go over to your neighbor and ask them to turn down the music, or when to. So anyway, I would very much love to see our town explore more beyond conversation, that kind of pursuit.
I think one of the options, and that the Howard Center does this, where they're available, 24/7, 365 for phone. So they got phone support. I'm looking at their website. I don't have this memorized, I promise you. Crisis intervention, referrals in connection to follow-up care. But they can easily say, this is not where we need to be. And I need you to call 911. This is, beyond our capacity. And they're also not going to put themselves on the first line of arriving at a scene where we may not actually know what's going on. So that's good too, because we want to protect. We don't want to pull back our police officers and toss our social workers, our mythical social workers as well, because we know how hard it is to get even highway operators, let alone, professional crisis mental health professionals into the Upper Valley and ask them to do that work. So, that's kind of the thing that I think about is in a perfect world, yes, but I don't want to promise anything for people that don't work for me, that don't even exist, and say, we'd like you to be the first line of a call that could be somebody wanting to turn down their music, could turn into something way more violent and reactionary. I am coming from a place where we did have police social workers, one of the first methods of this. And when I would interview with police social workers, they were put in situations where they thought they were going into one thing, a wellness call for an elderly person, and it turned into something that they couldn't have even imagined. And so definitely want to kind of keep that in mind too, as we want to, think about the best and the worst in those moments and how we can support everyone, both people who are calling and the people that we send out, even if they just look like you and me and they're going to try to help somebody get services. So.
Yeah, I 100% am not, and I recognize that as hard as it is to get public works employees and law enforcement employees, I know these mystical creatures, but because you are a police officer with a weapon does also not make you a mythical creature that can solve all those problems.
Totally.
And sometimes I think it is likely to cause more problems. And I just want to have that reality. I'm curious to know, if there are examples of situations in this town of Hartford where having an officer with a weapon has actually proven to be, to have provided the best outcome possible.
So I can add that all of our police officers go through CIT training.
Mhm.
So they're certified in crisis intervention training. They're also certified in mental health first aid as well as de-escalation. And when the police social worker that's on staff, albeit it's a Monday through Friday position, they do provide those same services that you're referring to by being able to respond to those situations. To echo what Tracy said, there are times anything could happen at any time. So finding a social worker that's going to go to some of those situations either by themselves or be the first response would be, again, we're talking mythical creatures here in that aspect. So there's that to toss into the mix. And Howard Center is, their equal down here is HCRS. And they also have the same services you can call. You'll get the mental health crisis team to come out. That may be a lengthy response, though. We've called them before and they could be coming from Brattleboro. So we have to contain that scene for that period of time.
Understood. I'm not expecting any immediate changes. I'm basically asking for the opportunity to explore options.
No,
We're
we're all supportive, of serving the community in the best way possible.
But there are times when, we encounter violence.
Yes.
In the public, and, we're even, staff is victim to that violence at times as well. Paramedics are trained in life-saving techniques, right? And not defense techniques. And I've had paramedics assaulted in the back of ambulances and things like that. So having that collaboration, that understanding is necessary. And some kind of the things, because sometimes those are snap scenarios that happen suddenly, no preparation whatsoever. So,
Well, I appreciate the consideration and I'll continue to pursue options.
Thanks, Kim. Joe, go ahead.
The peer support advocate, is that under the auspice of the police? Ideally, is that ideally?
Oddly enough, the contract is residing in my office.
Okay.
I think because of the way that the wellness coordinator come down, as of right now, because we're in the middle of budget, that contract is sitting in my department. It might be worth some looking for all of us because we do approve a bottom line budget, so we can move that over for us to really kind of sit down and think about this holistically. Because I know these folks shared a couple of weeks ago, but they are starting to do some like case management work in a quiet, private room with the Center for Restorative Justice to kind of fill in those gaps in terms of service and where people kind of need a little bit of extra help and need some extra resources. In the short story, it's that contract's sitting in my budget. I think that it would definitely, once the dust settles with the budget process, look at if we can kind of bring that all together and how we can build a framework around all of the different resources we have.
The reason I ask is because in your organizational chart, it did not list that. And so I was wondering where, if that were to reside in your department, where that would go.
I could see it as a collaboration between the police and the fire department. It would fit in there, be it under our auspice or theirs. That's where it would probably reside.
Thank you.
Thanks. Let's go to Ally and then Lanny.
Well, I see, I don't know if Simon, you have something on this topic, because I know Simon's been there for a while, a comment on this or a question about this topic. Just want to make sure you had an opportunity to.
If that's your question, go ahead.
Simon Dennis, I live here at Hartford. On the subject of the peer, I take it the peer support advocate is what we used to refer to as the community wellness coordinator. Okay. And is there still the hope that position could be a potential alternate track for people other than calling 911?
At this point, it's a part-time position, so in terms of like having them have a cell phone number, at this point, I don't think that that's an appropriate movement both for that position and right now for the infrastructure of if that non-911 call turned into needing to be a 911 call.
So there's also not a hope that it might evolve in that direction to being an alternate track. The
If
reason I
I-
ask this question is when throughout all of our discussions about advancing this position, there was this financial dimension of potentially rerouting some of the calls that where the 911 response was a burden on the town and an added expense to the town, but that in some case was misplaced. And if there was another place for people to call, that it would be potential cost savings and also potential alternate track.
One of the things we did look at when discussing and kind of creating the idea with ACRS for the peer support advocate was that it'd be part of the case management post of the net. So this person would service the need that was discovered during a 911 call, for example. So if we were dispatched to a 911 emergency, encountered an individual needing certain levels of services or undergoing some level of crisis, this would be the referral to that individual to now become a part of that case management team that this individual needs to seek whatever services they're looking for. So it was not necessarily the direct operational kind of response mode. It was the case management piece that would occur after either law enforcement, emergency services encountered an individual.
Okay, that answers my question. Thank you.
Thanks. Annie, go ahead. Oh, sorry, Ellie. So
okay.
we'll get you next.
No, go ahead. Lenny, it's good.
Sure.
Yeah.
For Deputy Chief Mail. So I understand correctly when Whitney Hassan was here for the department, she never went out by herself. She always,
If she went on a follow-up call that was non-emergent in our eyes, she would often go by herself. Generally speaking, though, if there was a call that came in, she would ride with the officer. The officer would often stand back and let her do her piece, but they were there.
So she, I'm sure she, for lack of a better word, would give you a cue if she felt it was above her level of care.
Correct.
To call you guys in if needed.
Correct.
At that point in time. So I take it neither her, you nor she had a comfort level of sending her out on a first call basis by herself whatsoever.
No.
And nor could you see a future that would enable someone to go out by themselves on a first line.
I don't think you would find a social worker that would want to go out on their own to an unknown situation like that.
Thank you.
Yeah, and that's not what I was proposing, just in case that wasn't clear.
Allie, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess just because, we keep seeing, unfortunately, the increase in mental health related calls and mental health crisis calls, not to get like too granular, but I'm really interested in just learning more about, there's the HCRS partnership and mental health crisis team that might respond in those situations. If it's like, okay, it seems like from the call that's received, this is clearly a mental health crisis. And then I guess I'm just sort of wondering like what the activation sort of steps are in that process of, so a call comes in, it definitely seems like it's mental health crisis related. And then how HCRS is dispatched and sort of how that process kind of works in those situations.
Right. So a lot of our calls, we get calls, for instance, people experiencing suicidal ideations. We will, if it rises to the level of that need of service for the mental health crisis team, they will come in. They can write those mental health warrants to get those people involuntarily committed. However, a lot of them are voluntary. They will take an ambulance ride and we will facilitate that to get them over to the appropriate medical facility. Again, they don't belong in our holding cell. And we work well with the fire department to get them to where they need to be. If it does rise to the level of somebody that is in severe mental crisis and is non-compliant with us and does not want to voluntarily get that service, then we will call out the mental health crisis team. Or if the police social worker, when she was here, was on staff and on duty, she would be there on those situations and she would work as that liaison. She was not, by the way, a qualified mental health professional where she could write those warrants, but she would liaise with those, her team members from the crisis team that would.
Okay, so depending on, so the HCRS wouldn't necessarily be immediately called. Like it would be like, okay, there might be the police social worker and a police officer, maybe fire paramedics who respond initially. And then once they assess the situation, and if it seems like it's escalating, then call an HCRS. and
Correct.
give it-
Or again, they could be transported right to the hospital. We do get a lot of calls for service like that. They are seeking assistance and we provide that assistance.
I would say 90% of the time that it terminates at the medical center.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
Eric Krause, Town of Hartford. May I direct some questions to the chief and deputy chief?
Sure.
A couple of data questions to start with. With the Station 2, and I apologize if I missed this, I came in a little tardy, but what's the breakdown in call volume for the area that would be serviced by Station 2 relative to the overall?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. In fact, I brought those stats with me. So I ran the numbers from 2020 through today's date. And as you can imagine, most densely populated of this area is White River Junction and Wilder region of the town. So that's where the majority of the calls happen. So it breaks down to the Quechee. So right now, there was a map on that slide I showed you. It kind of separates by the White River almost as you're moving out towards Quechee. So they're responding into West Hartford for some emergencies as well. It's about 25%. 25% of the total call volume is coming out of that station. So when emergencies are occurring and they're dispatched out of this main station, that ambulance might come over to White River as well, and it might move to West Hartford, or it might answer a call in Quechee region.
Okay, thank you. Another question on data, I think maybe applies to both departments. On the call volume charts, I think they were just call volumes. What percentage of those requires a response? So am I calling, do we see some of those numbers as I call in, but then no response is actually required, or the response is just handled by phone or something like of that nature? Like what requires field assistance or response?
Right. I don't have that specific breakdown here, but as I stated, a lot of those are proactive calls because they do come from our incident-based records management system. So just running the total allotment of incidents will give you everything from car stops to foot patrols to all of those. I could break that down further and get those numbers to you though. The call to the 911 center or the dispatch center that requires an officer to respond in a reactive manner as opposed to a proactive manner.
And I would say nearly 100% of ours are actual physical responses.
Okay. I guess in response to that, a comment, because the lines that you fit both of those charts with linear lines, and there may be in more recent years a non-linear curve. And so while I think it makes a lot of sense to explore alternatives in terms of first response and complementary services in the field, the broader question is, where are those lines going and what does that look like, say 5 years from now, 10 years from now? And I think the subject has been touched on briefly by a few people, members of the public sort of creeping up to the subject, but it's one of sustainability. And I don't really expect either chief or deputy chief to answer that question directly, but I think it's for all of us to be thinking about, like, so if we add someone that provides services, HCRS or whatever the other PSA were, what the terms were, relatively quickly, I think that person's plate is full. And then the question is, okay, do we need two of those roles? And then this is just sort of when does this stop? How do we get to sort of a root cause rather than addressing the symptoms? And I guess I should have started my comments just by thanking both of you and your departments for the work that you do and the load that you take on. But I see that that there's a need to sort of talk about some of the root, and it's not something that necessarily can change all alone. There's broader societal issues that are at play here.
To that point, you saw the slides that both agencies threw up about the community partnerships. Those partnerships are designed to get to the root cause, and that whole case management piece that we're working on. Quite often, we all deal with the same people. We may deal with this individual that is in DCF care, maybe on probation and parole. So we manage that case, manage that person, get to the root cause of what is causing the issues. And a lot of it is, it could be family issues, it could be drug and alcohol abuse. So those partnerships are designed for that purpose, to try to prevent that ever creeping line up in call volume.
Right, I appreciate that. But the linear fit of those tells a story, right?
I get where you're coming from.
Right. And it's not something that your department can necessarily address. It's a bigger, broader question, I think, that we have to talk about in conjunction with how to provide services in the immediate term. But thank you.
Thank you. Kim, is there one more?
Do you want to try to bring Doris over again?
Hello.
Hello, go ahead. You can state your
Hi.
name and town of residence, please.
Hi, Doris Valandry, Wilder, Vermont. I'm fairly new in this town. I purchased a property about a year ago on a dead end road here. I live along the railroad tracks, and I had an incident this summer, and I wasn't quite sure. I called 911. I heard some people arguing on the backside of my property, and it appeared that there was some homeless folks living alongside some railroad tracks arguing about calling the police and whatnot. When I went down to the bottom of my property, I noticed, there was some tents set up and whatnot, and a couple of individuals down there. And, I mentioned I was calling the police department, and of course, a few of them, started running down the tracks, and a couple of them looked like they were kind of high on drugs and whatnot. And, I was a little concerned because not knowing when I purchased the property, there's quite a big issue apparently on the backside of my property with a lot of folks coming in and out. That kind of bothers me quite a bit, knowing the fact that I'm a home provider for HERS. I have a lot of clients that I service, and some like to walk around here and whatnot, and I see an awful lot of folks walking down A Street, going down to the end, and apparently living in some of these abandoned trucks and whatnot down at these businesses down at the bottom of A Street. So most recently, and when I called 911, I was told, don't go down there by yourself. That kind of bothers me, being told, obviously don't go down there by yourself, knowing that, this should be a nice, safe area. My other concern is 2 weeks ago, my fiance and I were standing on my property. I happened to look down the backside of my property. This is actually on my property. And there's a tarp, a tent, carriage, a bunch of clothes, food, a pot and pans and whatnot. Somebody was actually living on my property. That I don't understand how that can happen in this town when I'm paying almost $8,000 a year in taxes, and somebody can just walk on your property and live on your property here. What do we need to do to correct this in this town, and who do we call when this happens on your property?
So I believe that's actually going to be addressed on the another agenda item tonight, if I'm not mistaken. There are processes in place that we are working on to address those situations.
And to further this conversation, when this happened a couple of weeks ago, apparently a homeless person continuously keeps walking through my neighbor's property in broad daylight while she works on her property. And this person was told several times to stay off her property. It's private property, and they continue to do it. So, living on a dead end road, and we live in an area that's, very quiet. We're all hardworking folks out here. And, it's kind of worrisome having this happen, and it seems like it's getting worse around here. And had I known that, I think I would have never purchased property up here. You know, I lived out in Weathersfield for 20 years and I thought this area would be, you know, decent. I just, you know, now I'm worried. I really am, because it seems like it's getting worse. I'm seeing more and more people go down the end of A Street. There's a lot of unoccupied vehicles down there and it just borders my property. It's scary.
Dolores has mentioned that's going to be the next agenda item on the top for the meeting tonight after we have our break.
Okay.
In terms of calling 911 for anybody out there, not just Dolores, I mean, we're gonna try to stay safe with people who call 911. So we're gonna probably tell you, hey, you know, let us check out something. It'd be the same if you called and said, I hear a strange noise outside my townhouse or outside my house. We're not going to say, hey, go on out and see what you could see. We're going to say, you know, if you feel worried, if you feel scared, let us come take care of that for you. So, you know, it would happen in any sort of case. If you felt worried about leaving your workplace at night and there was something out there that gave you cause to pause, to have concerns. If you were walking home and you saw something, we wouldn't ask a resident or a caller to take care of that investigation themselves. That's why we're here. And I say we, and I actually meant them, because you're not going to get me. If you have a public comment, we need you to head on up to the mic and state your name and where you live. So that way it can be on the recording. So that way we can put it in the notes.
I guess my name is Keith Ingles and I'm a White River resident. I'm just curious, what you're saying is she's feeling scared, I guess is what I'm getting at. And what you're saying is you're telling her that that's the same cause of action, whether it be a wild animal or a homeless person? I guess is.
No, what I'm saying is she said that she was concerned that that we didn't tell her to go down there and check out something that gave her concern. And no matter what that is, like, it's our job and our staff's job to respond to your calls and to take care of those sort of issues. So we're not going to say, hey, go on out and take a look at this yourself, no matter what the issue is. We'd like our staff to come and take that on for you and to respond for you, no matter what it is.
Right, okay, that's what I was getting at. I guess it seemed like she was scared that she wasn't allowed to go down and find out what was going on at the end of her property. That was.
All right, any other calls, Kim? Or then we'll go, well, is that?
No
the
more
last one?
hands up at the moment.
No more hands, okay, so we'll go to Dennis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a few comments, and so we're coming into budget season soon, and I was part of our decision of, I think 2 years ago, to add 3 new firefighters. And at that time, I thought that was going to be the cure-all to eliminate a lot of the overtime and steady things. And now things have got an increase. I'm going to, Eric asked these similar questions, but I was on the same thought. So I do wonder where we're headed into budget season, knowing that, because you know, your records show, I mean, increase in call, and like Eric said, you know, where do we go from there? So I'm on the same trail. I'm wondering that. I know the town managers warned us, you know, because of the increased calls, that you're probably going to be asking for more help. So I just do wonder. And now we have Station 2 to take care of. So not too long ago, I forget the reason even why, but I called dispatch and the 9425 number. And I did the last time I had called it before that, I got dispatch immediately, but this time I got a phone maze, and whatever it was I was calling didn't fit the question, which button to push. So I found that a little confusing, and I hope people that don't have emergencies do call that number. It does work, but it's a little harder to reach now. Is there if none of the above hit 0 or something, is that on there?
Yeah, and we did, we call it a phone tree, and the first time the phone tree was put in place, it was a bit clunky.
Okay.
And we have pared that down to, for administration, press 1, for dispatch and whatnot, press this number. So it has been pared down.
Yeah, okay, thank you for that. And then I've been sitting here learning, listening to folks and suggesting calling somebody else besides 911 and so forth. I used to play dispatch for a while. Some of you may know that. And I know I sent a lot of folks and we wasted a lot of time, but we're glad they called because as I don't think you pointed out, you're glad to have come to a wasted call, I think, because
absolutely
it may not gone that way, but you got the wheels rolling in the meantime. And if it had turned into something, you'd been there. Otherwise, if you're standing there waiting, should I go or send this other organization, that could lead into you time all your response times. And so if we're playing who to send, where to send, if we should send, that's all time. And what is it, a fire within 4.5 minutes is out of control beyond how much?
Within a minute, it doubles in size.
So like I said, you're probably actually glad to get somewhere and not be needed, but you at least got there in case you were needed. So it does end up with wasted time, wasted calls and fuel and so forth. But in the heat of battle, you're going to probably get things going, and I'm glad of that.
I would agree. I think anybody that's in the emergency service profession, if they didn't desire to provide service, they wouldn't be doing it.
Yeah.
And that's what my people are doing every day. They're out there to help people. But law enforcement's the same way. Right? We want to be doing this job. That's not what we wanted to do.
That's why you're in the right seat. So thank you.
Thanks, Dennis. Okay, looks like we'll take a break and we will come back here and have one up to shoot for about 5 after. So there's about 7 minutes.
Thanks, guys.
Yes, a lot of people have to go to the restroom.
Yes, so.
Selling tickets lovely.
still have
on unpermitted shelters around the town. And we also heard a number of public comments on shelters that people might be living in. I wanted to provide you just an informational update on what town staff have learned since then and what our abilities and capacities and rules say that we need to do. None of the structures that people identified for us are on town-owned land. So what that does is it means that there's kind of one area where we have authority, and that's with the town health officer. He has the responsibility to inspect areas for health and safety violations. What we heard from Brett last time is it's things like waste, needles, standing water, and other health and safety codes. He's charged by the state to do this work. He has his own processes, his own authority that rests outside of my office and predominantly rests with the state statute, and then he also works as the town health officer with the town health board, which is you all. He does have the ability to issue health orders, and like we heard from him, he can have a variety of different things, such as if he has an apartment that he feels is unsafe, he can evacuate those people to a hotel. He can also issue fines. I know that one of the issues that we've been having is it's hard to find complete and accurate information on processes in the town. It's definitely something that I've noticed. And so what we did to facilitate that is we had Deputy Chief Fred Vale mail a letter outlining all of the rules and regulations to the people who have these unpermitted structures on their property. We wanted people to have complete information, and we didn't want to be have multiple phone calls going to different departments at the same time, which is kind of what can happen a lot is we have issues that many people don't know.
Sorry, my baby's
So what we did is we provided information in a few different areas. One, we provided information about zoning and permitting and the regulations around that. So like I presented in my memo, people do need a zoning permit for any accessory use or accessory structure that's not defined as a farm structure or as a handicapped ramp. So that's most things. That's things like sheds and chicken coops and things like that. Actually, chicken coops might be a farm structure. Joanne, no, I know, normally I go to Joanne, our zoning administrator, who has this stuff on the back of her hand. So if you have an accessory use or an accessory structure, that property owner needs to get approval from the planning commission and or zoning, depending on the specific of each proposed use. If anybody's out there and they're like, wait a second, what does that mean for me? That means you give planning and zoning a call and they'll work with you to begin that process. We did provide contact information for our zoning administrator if property owners would like to get a permit. And she is incredibly knowledgeable and incredibly responsive. We did want to let people know that we do have fire permit requirements. I know it's pretty green out there, but fires happen, and we wanted to make people aware that fires require a permit. There's no charge for it, but we need to know where the fire is, what's being burned, and a few other specifics like that. They can decline to issue bird permits on windy days or dry weather, things that would naturally increase the risk of wildfire. So we provided information on where they could get a fire permit, and then also, what can happen if we arrive to an unpermitted fire, which is we could issue tickets, and we can also place the call cost, so the cost of responding to the call on the person with the unpermitted fire. Finally, we often get asked regulations about trespassing, and it can be hard to kind of suss out who to give a call to, whether that's me or zoning or fire or police or fire or the fire marshal. So we did provide property owners with information on posting their property and also how to provide the police department with their property information if they decide to not have trespassers on your property. This actually is also really helpful for folks watching at home if you don't want hunting or foraging on your property. So we often get a lot of calls around fiddlehead fern season and mushroom season. So if you've called me in the spring about people on your property foraging or hunting, and I know deer season's coming up, this is something else you can take care of. All of this was with the intent to just provide information and educate property owners on what we're required to enforce, and then to circumvent individual questions and concerns that might not get complete and accurate information from just one source.
Thanks, Tracy. Joe, go ahead.
When you say that letters were sent to property owners, if it's on state-owned property, where does that go?
I can't remember exactly off the top of my head. I had Brad send them, so I'm looking out in the audience with Brad, and I don't know the exact contact information. I think one was the Department of Transportation, and we usually have contacts within each agency in terms of like a regional manager or you know, a type of property within the state.
And much like a private property owner, they would dictate what to do or what they should do. I know for a private property owner, and correct me if I'm wrong, you ask them if you want the person on your property to be trespassed. Is that accurate?
Yes.
And so would you do the same thing for the state, or what's that process?
They can, like any property owner, request that their property be a no trespassing property, and they can make that call to ask us to remove any unwarranted people or people that don't have permission to be on their land. With larger state agencies, that's not, you know, typically something that like an individual who's there on their property every day. The state owns large swaths of property, so, but they could.
Thank you, Tracy. Thank you.
What else? Kim.
I'm curious if, I mean, I'd love to see the letter. I don't know if that's possible, not at this moment, but like, I'm curious if was the content of the letter like, you should get these structures off your property, or was it, here are the regulations? I'm curious of what the intent or the tone of the letter.
Yeah, so like I said, the intent was just to provide one point of information of, we've heard that you might have structures on your property. These are some of the things that you should consider. And also to circumvent the variety of phone calls where when we sit down in Monday stand up, it's like each one of us got a different phone call, including sometimes like the clerk's office, and preventing people from getting phone treed out almost, and knowing the information and who they can go to get more information on each one of these items.
Thanks, Mike.
What are the actions that a town could take if there is a structure on a property that needs a permit but isn't permitted? Is there a process we generally have? Are there fines or removal, or do you?
I haven't really gone there, Mike. You know, I haven't really kind of wanted to go down that road yet.
Yeah.
I think if, and you know,
I mean, I'm just wondering, like, if I built a chicken coop in my yard and I didn't get a permit, like, am I going to get fined? Or are they going to ask me to remove it? I just wonder what sort of remedies the town has for those kinds of
totally.
situations.
So, you know, let's bounce that up even bigger. And, you know, you've added on a bedroom and a bathroom to the back of your house. And we didn't know that you were going to do that. You don't have a permit. And somebody says that Mike, you know, Mike is built an apartment in the back of his house. What we might do is, you know, check in with planning and zoning. Do they have a permit? No, we would go out, we would issue some formal letters. You built a bedroom and bathroom on the back of your house. You didn't get fire, health and life and safety inspected. In order to comply with those, we need you to complete that process. Now, if we get pushback on that, that would probably be a question where I would walk across the hall to planning and zoning and say,
Sure.
okay, what happens if somebody built something on their property and they aren't willing to go through the process of doing that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So every homeowner is entitled to right to use of their property for their own purposes and to not have people, for lack of a better word, camping on their property. So what is the town's ultimate responsibility to our citizens, the town of Hartford and homeowners, to ensure that their property rights are maintained? And we have a lot of second homeowners in particular in the town of Hartford. So how do we maintain these, or how do we, I'm not sure if I'm using the term correctly, enforce or not, but how do we get the point across that we have the responsibility to ensure that these homeowners' properties are not infringed upon and their rights as homeowners are not infringed upon, even so far as state or the railroad or the hydro plant. It seemed like we would have some sort of responsibility as a town to ensure that their properties were not infringed upon.
We have a lot of green space and people have a lot of property, right? So like some of you might have acres of land that you don't necessarily walk every morning. So really our job is to listen, to provide education and information on the rules that we have, both town rules and state rules in terms of what you as a property owner can and can't do with your property, and to help you, if those are decisions that you want to make, help you with enforcement of those decisions. So for second property owners, especially, we can't control someone's 5 acres. We have to rely on them to do that work themselves as a property owner and let us know when they need assistance.
But if we're aware of structures on a property owner's property that they're not aware of, I mean, do we have some responsibility to ensure that we take care of that, or where does our responsibility begin and leave off in terms of that?
Definitely. And we have a couple of avenues, right? Like we just talked about, like zoning and permitting. So it could be something as simple as that. Or if there's a life and safety health issue, there are other ways that we can progress that in terms of enforcement, and possibly like ticketing. But it's a really kind of fine line in terms of your own property and possibly, I don't want to say the phrase nanny state, but it's not, we don't want to get too far into people's businesses if that's your land and your space, but also enforcing the things that we need to enforce, which really come out of health, life, and safety.
Okay, so now we'll take public comment. I want to remind people to state their name, their town. You have 3 minutes to speak, and there'll be no personal attacks. So, what up?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Eric Krause, Town of Hartford. I'd like to shift gears a little bit. I seem to be tiptoeing around the people in the room, so to speak, talking about chicken coops and foraging. And the fact of the matter is, you, the 7 of you, plus Mr. Mayfield, formed the local Board of Health, right? We learned that 2 weeks ago. I learned it 2 weeks ago. Maybe you knew, but so that's one bit of context. Is you are you must have under Title 18 some responsibility for the health and welfare of the people of the town, not limited to those who actually own property, right? Second point of context. 2 years ago, November 12th, I believe it was, I came out of a conference room with some committee members and found someone here in the hallway. We had a cold snap that year. And on the 12th, the nighttime low in Hartford was 8 degrees. The Haven was caught off guard, I think. They hadn't set up their warming shelter yet. It can happen. Who knows? Maybe this year on the 12th, it'll be 45 degrees and lovely outside at night. Maybe it'll be 12 again or 8 again. Winter's coming. That's about 7 weeks away. So 7 weeks, that's about 35 work days to get some work done. So that's, I think, the context that I'd like to start with. And the question I have for you all as the health board is, you have at your disposal Mr. Mayfield, the town health officer, You also have, who's a board member, you have a town staff, and you have a committee that you formed some while ago to address emergency shelter. And so my questions for you really are, what are your expectations for each of those three entities over the next 35 workdays? What do you expect to achieve? So between now and November 12th, or whatever arbitrary date we want to put on it, actually that's going to be governed by nature, that's coming imminently. What do you expect? So the governor made an announcement today about a pause in the current policy, basically extending, I think, to 30 days. But that throws a little bit of wild card into things, but I don't think it answers any questions. You still have to proceed on a path that, with the expectation that people are going to be in need of emergency shelter in 30 days, 40 days, whatever the number is. So what does going into winter successfully look like to you, the Board of Health? And what do you expect of the entities that I mentioned?
I think those are good questions. I think that's the reason initially that we formed this committee, was we know there are unhoused people in this community, residents in our community that don't have anywhere to go. And both locally at the state level and nationally, we know there's no affordable housing out there. So trying to figure out what the best way forward is. And this committee, I give a lot of credit to Ally, has spent a lot of time researching options that are available. And just for various reasons, they've exhausted all the sort of the town lands that were possibly, they've considered all sorts of different things and not come up with a solution yet, but they're still charging on to address those needs. So as we know, we have the Haven that helps a lot of people, but not everyone can fit into that mold. And sometimes they're full. So we're looking for that person out there that has the answer to help guide us. So, I think we're open to anything, but these are members of our community that we need to address the issue. So when, if the issue is we don't want them camping here, we don't want them sleeping there, then what are we going to do for them? That is the ultimate question. We want them to be safe. We want them to, be able to survive winter. As we know, this past winter, there were people that were homeless that did not survive the past winter. So we've got a lot of things on those plates. We have a lot of experts in this room, but together we have not come up with a solution yet. So we're throwing it out there to everyone and anyone with some solutions. These are residents of our community, and we need to help them find something that's appropriate. That's where we're at. Anyone else? Up.
My name's Heidi Duto, and I'm a resident of White River Junction, and I am one of the reasons why this is being brought up. I walked into this homeless encampment and found that these structures were inhabitable because last fall, the fall of 2020, they were deemed unsafe for human habitat by our town health official, and they were deemed unsafe by our fire department. Yes, they were. They were supposed to be taken away, and now they are still on Mr. Simon Dennis's property, which they're still unpermitted, as far as I'm understood. They are still up on A Street, as far as I'm understood. And I would like to ask Tracy a few questions myself. The charter does not give you authorization to change policies. So I would like to know how it was rewritten, the homeless encampment policy.
I feel really uncomfortable with
I'd just like to know how it's rewritten and when you're going to uphold the laws and enforce the laws and
Okay, the procedure here is if you address questions to the board, and if someone who's
okay,
not
I
on
would like to know when the select board and the town manager is going to uphold and enforce the laws of this town to make the people of this town safe. It's not that I'm against the homeless people of this town, because I know there's homeless problems across the entire world. I go out of my way to help people that are homeless. I transport them to rehab. I feed them. I go out of my way to help them. But I also do not feel safe in my own home. Do you?
Usually I do, yeah.
Well, you're very fortunate.
And that's why we have the presentation we just had tonight. If you don't feel safe, there's any issues that come in front of you. And in terms of, I think we had a very nice.
Unfortunately, of majority.
Please don't cut me off, okay? I gave you a chance to talk. Please let me finish, okay?
Well,
Thank you. So here we have this presentation with what we're doing. Okay, these are the town. If you want the rules and the regulations followed by your end, they also have to be followed by our end. We just can't go in there and randomly do things just because the resident tells us to. There's a process and a procedure in place for how to handle these things. And there's not a policy on homelessness. There's a guidance. Okay, so there's not that is not something that needs to be addressed at this time. Okay, so there's a guidance memo in place. Is what there is.
So when are zoning laws going to be enforced?
There's a process that happens that when something is reported to us, we report it to the town manager, it gets followed up in that direction.
I went to zoning and permits yesterday and I was told that they are not even allowed to talk to us.
I don't know what the procedure is specifically. I don't know what the rules are.
We
Okay?
can't even, we are not, as people of this town, even permitted to speak to the zoning and permit department anymore. They were directed to send us to Tracy or Brett. Now, how is that correct in this town? Is it time to call the state in? I'm just questioning this.
I don't know the proper procedure. Yes, Kim, go ahead.
I mean, this is not something that I would do, but did you file a police complaint?
No, I'm about to.
I mean,
I'm going to the zoning and permit meeting tomorrow at 6:30 also to get some of my answers.
Okay, because if we're talking about enforcement, I don't agree that it is the best path to take, but if you have a complaint to file, I think it's going through that avenue.
I would just like to know how Tracy's going to follow through on this. I mean,
there's procedures in place. And
nothing is being addressed here in the proper procedures and or enforcement.
I'm not sure.
She said she's going to handle this.
I think as you present things to us, this is the first time we've heard some of these complaints, which is just now. So she can't address it on the spot. It's after hours, okay? So I think hearing those things, she'll take those back to the proper channels and follow up and get some answers. But things don't happen instantaneously. We need to find out, okay, is this really the situation? Or was it a misunderstanding? We need to find out the details from the other side, the other people involved, and then we're going to address it. But it's not gonna happen right now at 8:30 at night. We're gonna take that
I
information.
tried to address this 2 weeks ago, but I was
Yes.
told that it was not at the proper time. We were put off for 2 weeks.
It wasn't on the agenda. And if we're going to make decisions to let people know so they can be involved, we have to warn it so that people can participate, which is what we did tonight. So we heard your concern, we brought it to our next available meeting, put you on the agenda, this topic, and here we are discussing it so we can handle it. There's a process involved. You can't pick and choose which rules apply to you. They're going to apply to everybody, and we have to follow the proper
Are they
procedure.
going to though?
They should. Yeah, they should.
Should or will they be?
I can't promise anything. I'm telling you what the process is. I can't make anyone do anything. I can just hear your concern and pass along the proper channels. That's all I can do. And if you don't like the answer, then you can file a complaint, as Kim suggests. But
So
there's
are
a
you telling me
procedure.
that I need to go to the police station and file a complaint?
I'm not telling you anything. I'm telling you that we heard your complaints and we're listening to you and we're going to follow up. But it's not going to be tonight at 8:30. No, we're not having a discussion. If you need to speak, you need to come to the microphone.
Should
We have some
he
questions here.
come up here and address me?
Who?
Both
No,
the
no, no,
gentlemen in
no,
the
no,
front row.
not right now. No, you need to get in line and we're going to take the comments up here. Dennis, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Heidi, you mentioned about going to the zoning meeting tomorrow night. I believe that's canceled. The applicant withdrew the application, so I don't believe there's a meeting. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thanks, Dennis. Okay, come on, state your name, town of residence.
Sue Ellen Parmenter. I reside in White River Junction, Vermont. I'm here on behalf of a pretty large group of taxpayers. And our concern is after some requests under the Freedom of Information Act, we were alerted to the fact that the first homeless encampment on Prospect Street cost our community, our town, over $6,000. I have to answer some of the other questions that came up, I have an email, Tracy, from Kevin Claremont. It's dated March 31st of 2021. Our town appealed to the state as well as the railroad because technically it's state railroad property. The response was that on March 30th of 21, a formal notice of trespass was executed by the Vermont Trans and the railroad. The document was emailed to Brad Vale with the Hartford police such that the eviction process can immediately proceed, and the aforementioned individuals and future individuals can be evicted from the railroad right away. After communicating with the Vermont Trans Management yesterday afternoon about this specific situation, V-Trans will not participate in the cleanup cost due to the actions of Simon Dennis, while a member of the Town Hartford Select Board, who then incited the situation adjacent to Prospect Street. Now, that's unacceptable. By any measure, unacceptable. We could be doing so much with $6,000 to help the people that are homeless here tonight. Not letting somebody go rogue, because we have this on tape, putting these things up. Now we have another encampment that needs to be cleaned up. And I would like to know, are we gonna eat another $6,000? How are we gonna address this?
Well, there's different issues there. So some of the issues are that if there's something that's in town, that is a danger, that needs to be cleaned up, we have to clean up. It's part of our duty as the health board and as the town to keep those things clean. So if we can trace those back somehow, if we can figure out how that happened, then we will try to hold those people accountable, but it's not always possible.
We have a video, Dan, of these people telling us how it happened. 2 separate videos of these people in these encampments, and of Simon himself telling us that he put those houses there.
I'm not
So
gonna,
how are we dealing with this, and what are the repercussions so that we don't have to keep continuing to eat these monies
Right.
because the encampment is being put in the same place, because there seems to be no repercussions for these behaviors?
I'm not sure if the encampments are being put in the same place or if they're being put on the same property, which is the railroad. I think there's a difference there. I'm
It's
not
the
sure.
same
I don't know.
stretch. It's the
Okay.
Prospect Street
So-
up to 8th Street.
So yeah, we do need to address that. Brings us back to the question
There needs to be
originally.
consequences.
There needs to be some consequences. And what we're doing is we're working with the policies and procedures that we have in place in town to address those issues. That's all
Including
we
the
can do.
eviction.
That's all we can do. Yeah, you presented the information to us. We have it. We need to move on from there. We need to figure out how the
We
best way
do,
to address
because
it.
there are
Yeah,
people that need housing before winter.
absolutely.
But we are remiss to think that all of you are social workers. That is not your, that's not your deal. That's not, you guys are doing what you can for our town. I honestly believe that. But what I also believe is we should leave, I'm very, very proud of my community. We support Listen, we support the Haven. I myself cooked 8,500 meals during COVID and delivered them to homeless residents in this community with the support of some of the small businesses here. It's not that we don't want these people here. We want them here and we want them safe.
We all do. And that's the
And we
thing.
don't want to have them on other people's property,
No.
such as Doris, who
Right.
is fearful to go outside her home
Right,
now.
right.
So
As
I'm
I say
just,
before, we need to work together to find the
Again.
solution. We can't, that's the thing. What do we do? That's the
Again,
issue.
but $6,000, he needs to pay that bill. He needs to pay it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I think I
Yes,
brought
I
this
have
up.
actually in this town. Yes, sir.
Wait a second. Someone has the floor up here, okay? Thank you.
I brought this up at the last meeting. I think that one of the concerns that the town has to have is that unfortunately, Mr. Dennis is a member of a committee who is on a homeless committee. You can't, if I can't detach myself from the select board, as a member of a committee within the town of Hartford, you can't detach yourself from a committee. And it's very difficult to detach yourself away from that. And if these allegations are true, and I have no reason to believe that they're not, or to believe that they are, because that's for the police chief to find out. But if these allegations are found to be true, what liability does that lend to the town if we have a member of a committee in our town doing these actions? Does that then hold our town liable to clean up these structures?
I think first of all, we need to collect the facts, and until we have the facts from all the parties involved, which you said is having the experts here explore what's out there based on the information we have. That's where we need to start. And until then, I don't think we can make any decisions. I think everyone has some of those same questions. Some of them might be right, some of them might be wrong. But until we have all the facts in front of us from the experts in our town that present it to us, that's all we can do is wait until we have that information. Yes.
Good evening. My name is Brandy Briggs. I don't really know where to start. Heidi, did you feel unsafe when you were in my camp?
Yes, I did actually.
You did? Why were you filming in it then? That's all.
Evidence, like present it to this committee.
To do things for people, to say that you did them is not helping.
Okay, let's, okay,
It's a.
Address
it's a-
yeah, address the board, please, okay, and no
So,
personal attacks, so
what
share
I'm
your
gonna say
information up
is,
here.
I've initiated for the evacuated camp to be cleaned up with the Haven, with some other folks. I don't know who else will get involved. I'm not sure if hazmat will be needed. I'm not sure. There's still a couple tents down there, some other stuff. And it'll probably take a day to haul that out, but I'm trying to do it so it's not costing the town anything. And hopefully we can get some volunteers and get that spot cleaned up. I am residing in Wilder in a dome. That's up the tracks a bit from the old encampment where I was for 15 months. I never had fire or rescue or police or ambulance there. Right after the big snowstorm, the health officer showed up and made sure I was okay and all of that. Said camp looked great. I had police officers and census workers show up in the middle of the night at 1 a.m, which I thought was kind of weird, but they said the place looked great. I kind of fall through all of the loopholes because I'm not affiliated with HCRS in that manner, and I'm not disabled. So I am not able to get all of the resources that some people think that I'm hiding my identity to gain, I guess. So with that, I kind of fought with the state of Vermont last fall for a while, trying to get help with some fuel assistance. I helped out another homeless woman and let her occupy the other dome that was at my camp. She moved out in the middle of the night and ruined my generator. So I had no heat for 48 days. It's a good thing I grew up off grid and I'm a Mother Nature girl, you know? So I made it work. I never had a fire on the dome. I never had a fire elsewhere. And this is when cold temperatures, you're dumping gas into a generator, you're changing oil, you know, you're trying to haul back in there to gain that warmth. So for about 6 weeks, I fought with the state of Vermont until finally the worker said, Brandy, you have all of this stuff at your camp. Why don't you go ahead and homestead? So I did. That's what I had to do to get, I think it was like $400 in fuel assistance. So that is good actually until November 8th. I have already reapplied. I have never littered. I've picked up other people's trash at Listen. I've volunteered time to do that. Like picked up garbage at Park and Ride when I was there. I'm kind of anal about the garbage actually. So that's what I'm kind of known for a little bit. Okay. So we're not on anyone's property personally. We are on state property where we are. The other camp was part state, part Hydro Quebec. The couple that was still residing there, I believe, was evacuated 3 weeks ago. I don't know if they were told they weren't allowed to go back and get any stuff, if they weren't allowed to be there, if it was like a no trespassing thing at that point, I don't know. But I have since initiated to try to get a cleanup crew for that spot so that it's not over the bank, near the water, whatever, because I do care about things like that. I don't know. There's too many things.
So Brandy, before you go, let me ask you this. What, do you have any solutions to this problem? What could be,
The thing is like I said, I fall through a lot of the loopholes where other people would be able to get help and they'd be able to get a voucher and into a subsidy apartment. I've worked my whole life, you know, up until 2 years ago, I was wrongfully evicted. And He tried to serve me papers at work over $91. And I just put my dog down. I put like $8,000 in my truck. And I was like, are you kidding me right now? So I was like, okay, you want to humiliate me in my job? Like, I'm gonna fight now. And I won, and the building was shut down. And it took them 14 months to get it up to code. I don't know what the solution is, but you know what? You know what I would have without that dome? I would have a shitty tent that rips every time you try to get in and out of it. And I would have skunks rubbing up against my arm in the night. And I would have people be able to pillage the stuff that I do have there, you know? And it's a sense of security. When I was in the other dome for 15 months, that was my home. It was. It wasn't that I gave up on the idea of eventually finding an apartment. It's hard to do as a single person. I worked at Corner Stop Mini Mart gas station for 2.5 years, rented at Green Valley. The rent was $1,000. It was very difficult. It was. I mean, if you want something bad enough, you make it happen, right?
Great, thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, Brandy.
And sir, I think you've spoken once, so I want to make sure there's other people that haven't had a chance. I know you haven't spoken on this topic yet, but I want to make sure we get to residents first, if there's anyone else, before we get to people that are non-residents.
And we do have a few.
Emily.
I'm Keith Goki. I've been in the GO box that signed me up. Where my camp is, where Brandy is, he spent months down there, me and my friend Mike, cleaning up after all these other people that trash the woods. We didn't ask for no help. I didn't have the money to get rid of all the garbage, but I got rid of it. So, for people that want to say that, oh, I don't feel safe in your camp. My camp is one of the cleanest camps on the whole riverbank. I've been there for almost a year. I was in it all winter long last winter. Not a problem. The cops have never been down there only to do welfare checks. They have never been down there for any criminal charges, activities, anything. I don't let anything illegal in my camp. I swear to God, I spent about 6 months down there cleaning up for 8-9 hours a day to get it to what it is now. Now, if the town can't understand and appreciate what me and my friend Mike did to clean those woods up, I don't know what to say. I can't live with my girlfriend because she's on subsidized Section 8 housing. I'm not gonna have my girlfriend be homeless with me. I won't do it. My girlfriend, and I've been with her for 10 years. I will never jeopardize that house. So I mean, for people that, downless homeless people, like this lady back here that said that she's helped the homeless, but it seems like she's against the homeless. It makes no sense to me. Solution, I wish I had a solution. You think I like living the way I live? No, I don't. But I have no choice. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so let's have you, again, you've spoken once before, so let's just make sure we've got people, I know we're on this topic and we'll get to you, okay? Let's see if there's anyone on the call first, and then we'll come back to people who've had a chance to speak once before.
Do you want to bring Brian over?
Hi, I've just unmuted. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. So I just want to say
You state your name and town of residence, please.
Yeah, Brian Lucard. I actually live in West Lebanon, only about a half mile across the bridge into White River Junction. And I'm on the emergency shelter committee in Hartford, and I have spent a lot of time working with the homeless population in Hartford. And I've just been listening tonight, and I just have a few points I would like to make. And one of those is that every homeless camp that a shelter has been placed on was one that had already existed. Okay, so there's no creating of new encampments. That's never happened. So I want that to be clear. The other thing is that because of the COVID pandemic, we've seen a record number of people lose jobs, come out of the workforce, and to the state of Vermont's credit, what happened in that situation is the state of Vermont put up a historic number of people into hotels, and that helped keep hotels afloat, keep them in business, and let them weather the storm of COVID. And it also put people into shelters, some of which fared well in those shelters and some of which didn't fare as well in those shelters. But the real important thing now is that that has ended, and so or is in the process of ending, and it's been done, you know, as well as anybody could hope, right? And so they've slowly ramped down being able to have people in shelters, in these hotels, but that means that more and more people have gone outside. Okay, I think that we have an accurate understanding of how many people there are out there in camps. One of the best ways to not have your camp moved or be evicted is to be invisible. And so there are many, many camps that I think nobody in the room is aware of. And that's going to continue. And I think that that's not what we want, right? We don't want camps on somebody's property, people finding those camps, and then there having to be people come in and evict those camps, because every time that happens, the homeless person living there has to basically move their entire life, you know, usually in a very short period of time. It's extremely disruptive to them, especially when all of their time and resources are really going on getting basic needs like food, water, and warmth. And so really what the committee has done, and I'll say what Simon Dennis is very committed to as a part of the committee, is finding a legal solution where there are places that either there can be low cost temporary shelters, or a place where somebody can legally camp and not have to face the really high cost of housing in the community, and also be able to gain resources to mental health issues, resources for any kind of addiction issues, and resources of just living a pro-social life, and being able to move on in a safe way. And so, I mean, I think that there's a lot of misconceptions out there right now, in that, oh, there are shelters going on to places where there shouldn't be a shelter, okay? And these places are places where people have already been camping and don't have the resources, don't have you know, warmth to stay there in a healthy way. And so, you know, that's one issue. That's a difficulty, and one solution to that issue would be if there was land that was permitted as a campground, where people could go and could stay. And that's one of the solutions that our committee has discussed. And another solution is having structure like a mobile recreational vehicle that was capable of warmth and efficient living in the wintertime in our climate, be able to stay in hosted places where the landowner agreed that that recreational vehicle should be. And we have looked towards what laws and what permits would be necessary for that. And it's sort of an interesting double-edged sword that you come up against, in that people who own land would love for there to be less permits. They would love to be able to build a chicken coop or even a tree house for their children without having to worry about the permits. But as soon as you're trying to get a permit on owned land, or a law to allow you to put an RV on owned land, to have a
Hey,
homeless
Brian,
person.
we're coming to the end of your 3 minutes here, so if you can wrap it up, that's great. I think we get the gist of what you're saying. We appreciate that, and we thank you for serving on the committee. And if you want to send us a follow-up email or something that way, that's great. So just wrap up your comments for us if you can, please.
Yeah, so I mean that's really it. That's the gist of my comments is that the charge of the committee is to look for a solution, and that's all we're trying to do. And we would love positive comments and help to find a solution.
Thanks, Brian. Okay, Kim, who's up next?
Can you bring in the phone number ending 2077? I think they just did.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead. Can you state your name and town of residence, please, and keep your comments to 3 minutes?
Yes, Doris Valandry again, Wilder, Vermont. I'm just kind of following up on a couple of the things that Sue Allen had brought up earlier in reference to the railroad tracks. So is there a procedure for eviction if anybody is kind of doing an encampment in like maybe the tent type of situation along these railroad tracks in the state of Vermont?
I think if I'm hearing you correctly, and that I think is what Tracy, the town manager, answers, yes. So something's been issued to the owner of the property, and then they have the option of doing a do not trespass.
Okay, so basically along these railroad tracks, like anybody can just pitch tents and have a bunch of people just kind of living there? I mean, because like what I've seen so far, and I respect the fact of any of these homeless folks that are picking up after themselves, but I myself have witnessed a lot of trash being left behind, that people do come and, camp alongside of these railroad track areas in the backside of A Street. And that was one of my biggest concerns also of a lot of these abandoned vehicles that are at the end of A Street, what the town can do to have these businesses remove this stuff to avoid more and more folks going down there. I mean, they're literally bringing all kinds of stuff down there. And, maybe that can help some of it, more people coming down there we can remove some of these abandoned vehicles as well. I mean, it just doesn't make sense to have, I just don't see how we can allow more and more people just going down there and just living alongside of the tracks and whatnot. I don't feel safe. And,
Right. So the town has done what they need to do, which is notify the property manager, which is the state, the railroad. And then they have the option of contacting us, and they can issue a do not trespass. The vehicles, if they're on private property, I guess it's up to those owners. And, I think you could potentially call and make a complaint so that we can review who that is and see if we can figure out where those vehicles are and contact the owners and let them know. But again, it's up to the owners if it's on their property as to how they handle that situation, unless it violates one of the town rules, policies.
So a business is allowed to keep like a lot of unregistered vehicles like down there? I mean, I don't know if you've taken a ride down at the end of A Street to see, what's down there, because I'm hearing that they're living down in these vehicles down there as well.
I don't know. We'll have to explore that. I'm not sure about that. If people living in those vehicles, I don't know.
Have you been down there yourself to explore any of that?
I don't think that's relevant at this time. I've been to A Street before, but it's not really relevant to the situation since I'm not one of the parties that's involved there as an owner. People are bringing things to me as a member of the board.
Okay.
Thank you. Anything
Thank you.
else? Thanks.
That's it.
Okay, who's up next? Is that it?
That's all on the Zoom.
Okay, great. Okay, so being conscientious of the time, it's almost 9 o'clock. There's 3 people here that want to speak that are in line. I would ask people to, if they want to speak, that they actually come into the queue right now so we are aware. If there's anyone else in the room that wants to speak, that they are here so that we want to keep people to no more than 3 minutes, okay? Again, no personal attacks. Go ahead.
So I appreciate the comparison between unpermitted structures and the people doing unpermitted additions on their own homes. And I think it's clear that we have a zoning department, we have a planning department for a reason, and we expect them to enforce our planning regulations. However, I do think there's some considerations that I would like to bring to the board's attention to drive a little bit of daylight between these 2 scenarios, because it's a very contextual situation. I just wanted to share some observations, really in the form of some questions. So first question is it possible for us to have an acute housing shortage without creating a group of unsheltered individuals in the town? I know that you all are aware that we have currently have estimated to be a 10,000 unit shortage in the Upper Valley. Here in Hartford, you may not be aware that we have approximately 22 unsheltered individuals. What I want to just us to recognize that it is probably not possible for us to have a 10,000 unit shortage without creating this group of unsheltered individuals. So next thing that I want you to that I want to ask is when unsheltered individuals go to bed at night, are they breaking the law? Another way to ask this question is it possible for an unsheltered individual to go to bed at night without breaking the law? Is there a place that they can go? Just imagine for yourself, where might that be? Where would it be for an unsheltered individual to go to sleep at night without breaking the law? And if there's a homeless shelter, then they're sheltered. If there's a hotel, then they're sheltered. But if they're unsheltered, in other words, if they're a tent and they're going to pitch a tent somewhere, or I mean, hopefully they have a tent. Maybe they don't. Often they don't. Okay, so that's so we are in a realm of the inevitability or the systematic creation of a situation where certain individuals are breaking the law. If they have no choice but to break the law, is it responsible to punish them for doing so? Is it right to punish people for breaking the law when there is no possibility for them to do otherwise? And the circumstances leading to that situation are created by the larger system of which we're all a part of? The answer is no, it isn't. And another question, this is another thing that I want you just to ponder. We are all aware that our community is losing unhoused people at a rate which is very high. Now, I don't know what that rate is, but I am aware of that we lost unhoused individuals from our community. They perished January, February, March, April of this month. That was 4. And there's a whole slew that I'm unaware of. Okay, let's say we have 100 unhoused people in our community, and how many have we lost in 2021? Fact is, we don't know. But is it responsible for us not to know the case fatality rate, or are we responsible for knowing the case fatality rate of being unhoused in our community? Should we be tallying up those figures so that we know the situation that we know the cost in human life of this situation which is systemically created? Now, I'm asking you for something. I am asking you, each one of you, to influence this town towards taking action to address a situation which is a crisis. And my confession to you, and I say this with no rebuke or accusation, but so far, we haven't done it. So far, viable solutions have been brought forward and they have yet to be supported. In other words, we might not support them without each one of you. each one of your heart crying out saying, this is unacceptable. And when I say unacceptable, I'm talking about people in tents in winter. That is the baseline fundamental situation that we're looking at right now, is that here in the town of Hartford, we have people in tents in winter. That is unacceptable. Someone else pointed this out to me. I was on the phone with me and they said, look, bottom line is that people camping out in tents in winter is unacceptable. And I thought, that's the foundation of this conversation. If it's unacceptable, let's not accept it. If we don't accept it, let's work to change it. And part of the reason why it's unacceptable has to do with carbon monoxide. It has to do with tents catching on fire, and it has to do with freezing to death. Okay, that's part of the fundamentals of tenting in winter. So all of this is part of what we need to think about to bring a little bit of distance between our comparison between building an unpermitted addition on your single family dwelling and people who are working to survive. And we, as individuals, have a responsibility to support them in that. Thank you.
My rebuttal to this is simply this. No one should have to be cold in the wintertime, I get that. But where does our responsibility to people who don't follow the rules when they are given housing, they are either committing crimes or whatever, do we beat them over the head to get them to accept our help? Whose decision is it? I mean, who's vetting these people? You're putting them on the railroad track, telling them this is a great place to be. Who's vetting them? Because it took me 2 minutes to walk up that track and realize how many violent felons and sex offenders are bordering my neighbor's property. And yes, they should be frightened to walk to the border of their property. I should be frightened. So we beat them over the head because they don't want to follow the rules. They don't want to go and get the housing that Mike Redmond offers them, or they've been thrown out of the shady lawn for bad behavior or violence against other people. So because of that, we're going to beat them over the head with our version of help. You don't get to pick and choose whether my kids are safe, Simon.
I just have to say, I'm uncomfortable with some of the what I'm feeling like are stereotypes being tossed around about members of our community. I think it's a huge misconception to just throw out that one, I think we need to be really mindful of the language that we're using. Saying things like these people, I think is offensive and disrespectful. Where they are individuals and members of our community that we, as we all are talking about, we have a responsibility to take care of. So as we move forward in this conversation, I hope that we eliminate that language because it's completely unacceptable and disrespectful. And these stereotypes of who is safe and who is unsafe and the assumptions that we might have around that. I will stop there, but I really need to caution us with the language that we're using because we're talking about human beings who have lives and feelings, and their humanity deserves to be respected. Thanks.
Thank you, Ally.
So the property owners.
Sean Elsa's. I was homeless a year and a half ago, or 2019. I'm a former lieutenant from Texas. And I agree with what they're trying to do, but I disagree with where they're putting these shelters. A solution that I could come to the table with, if y'all have empty parking lots up here where they're monitored and in a controlled environment, would be perfect. Because you don't know what's happening down there at the camps. I've lost 2 friends from overdoses living down there. I personally haven't been down there this year because I've been sick a lot. But I wouldn't want to live down there. I mean, bless the people that do live down there. I've seen that other states have shelters that are built in town where it's monitored by the community. I think Everybody needs to be held accountable. If you're going to live in these shelters, you need to like have a caseworker. You gotta follow a program. You can't just come and go and just think that's where you're gonna live forever. I didn't think that when I ended up at the Haven. I mean, I thank God I ended up there, because if I would have slept in my car another night in the wintertime, I don't think I'd be standing here today. So that's one of my solutions. Another solution, these parks, the state parks that close in the wintertime, why can't we get together as a community and talk to these state parks and have homeless people put there? I mean, what harm would it be to do that? It's in a safe place. You have park rangers going around. I just think that, you know, being by a railroad track is not a great idea. But being in town or being at a state park or being in a field where you're monitored would be a good solution. I know the state of Vermont gave $3.5 million for homeless to help the homeless build another shelter. Where's this money going to? I'm confused about it. You know, but that's all I got to say on that. I just think that it needs to be in a safer place. You are going to have homeowners that are afraid to go. I'm not afraid to go down there. I mean, I'm not afraid of my fellow homeless people, because I still consider myself, even though I have a home, that will never leave me of being homeless. Because I know how it feels. And I know how it feels to be disrespected as a homeless person. You know, they are human beings also. They don't need to be put down. People don't need to be afraid of them. I can understand the fear of where they're at. I get that.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Sean, thank you. Sean, your name?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. I just want to get your name right. Thank you for sharing that. And I think just for some context, and I think Brian earlier over Zoom was speaking to some of these solutions that the Emergency Shelter Committee has been trying to pursue. And actually a couple I think are kind of per your suggestion is like Vermont State Campground, a possibility. And for reasons that I need to go back and look into all of my notes on, it's more, I think it's a great idea. And there's a lot of kind of complication around a designated campground, and a lot of sort of the Vermont state regulations kick in, which, you know, are certainly there for a reason, but I think make it a higher barrier to access than maybe the committee anticipated in that exact idea. But I appreciate you bringing it up, because it's definitely something that we were like, maybe that would work. And to your point about, is there a place where a plot of land, and that's actually one of the original pieces of the charge of the Emergency Shelter Committee that I was initially charged with, is to think about, is there a permitted plot of land that would be viable, that would be low, basically kind of a low barrier campground for folks to have, that would be close to transportation, that would have water and sewer lines maybe, and that might be managed by a nonprofit or another entity, not managed by the town, so that folks could be in a place where they feel a sense of community, they have resources, they can get to and from town, and they have the things that they need to be safe. And I mean, the committee, I think, has looked at over 100 different properties in the town of Hartford, and keep coming up empty for various reasons, either folks that don't want to sell the land for that purpose, who feel uncomfortable using that land for that purpose, or other kind of, you know, structural aspects about the land. But which I just wanted to give you that context, because I appreciate those ideas, and we're absolutely, you know, considering them. It's been very challenging.
And I understand.
Sean, we gotta have other people talk. Okay, sorry. We got other people in line here. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Wayne Kendall. I reside in White River. First off, I want to say what Simon Dennis is doing is admirable. trying to help the homeless people, the unsheltered people. That is great, and I applaud Dennis Simon for that. I just ask that it's done properly, done by the guidelines, the laws, the ordinances. Everybody can say I'm on a witch hunt. I'm not. I just want to see this done properly. And I'll apologize to Simon. This isn't a witch hunt. It's not meant directly at you. It's just, please, do it legally, do it properly, do it safely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, to go back to a couple other things that were said.
Your name again, please? Your name again?
Oh, Brandy Briggs.
Brandy,
I
thank you.
reside in Wilder, Vermont. I don't remember where I wrote that down. So, I mean, to date, approximately, I have saved the state of Vermont $74,000 not being housed in a hotel. My reasons for not wanting to be in a hotel are various. I didn't want to be right in the middle of a lot of drug activity or around a bunch of people that, you know, with COVID and all that. I wanted to be able to see my grandson. And staying away from where I am, like I'm able to do that. The other thing is 43 people that I knew very well since last March are now gone. Not all OD related, some weather, some accidents. One was a girl was in a car, carbon monoxide. It's all various things. 43 people in like 17 months. That's crazy, right? The 48 days I went without heat from November 7th-ish to January 2nd. I stayed alive because of that dome that I was in. I heated it with a 3-wick candle for 48 days. Hand warmers too at night. Say you're so afraid of people with, you know, warrants or a criminal background.
That's the point.
But
Wait, the person has at the microphone is the one speaking.
on Facebook, so.
No, we're having one
I'm just
person
saying,
speak.
For real. I can't comment on it because she has me blocked. So that's all I'm saying there. It's just rude. It's false information, it's slander. Also, many of the individuals that rent the spaces up in the industrial park, we've become to know. We've become friends. They watch out for us. I have permission to get water up in the park instead of having to use a cart and go to the laundromat or wherever else to fill water. It wasn't easy once COVID started. You couldn't fill water bottles at Cumbies anymore. You couldn't even use your own cups, blah, blah, blah. There's just there's a lot of things, like there is no immediate solution. That's why the homeless committee is what it is. Finding a piece of land, like I always say, 8 out of 10 people, there's that one person that's just gonna be like, and ruin it. There's always gonna be that one person. And it's very difficult to be able to put a group of people together on a piece of property where maybe they'll have transportation, maybe they won't. That was the other thing, is so people can get to their appointments that are necessary and whatnot, to keep going and get a foot ahead and hopefully gain further in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Keith Ingles, White River. So we're homeless, we're already kind of struggling. We do need help, and it's not helpful so I'm gonna bring up the point that we all have laws that we all have to abide by. They're the same for me that they are for you, for everybody. That's why we have police officers, that's why we have a system, that's why we all follow the system. So when somebody breaks the law and they get in trouble, there's a process they have to go through. And when that process is done, they're put back into society because they have paid their debt to society. That's why we have this process. So after you've committed a crime, been in trouble, you've repaid your debt to society, you are now back into the community. It's not helpful for people to look at you in the same aspect that you are still that person. You know what I'm saying? Because they're not going to help you. They're going to keep treating you like you're the same thing. So even if you've changed and are trying to be different, the small-minded bigotry of people viewing you that way is not going to help anybody, nor is it going to make anybody look at you any different. So therefore, how can you get help? How can you be productive? How can you succeed? There's just, that's like a problem all on its own. So I guess I just would like to make that clear to certain people who just want to attack the homeless people. We're homeless because of one thing or another. It doesn't mean all of us homeless people are dangerous criminals, drug addicts, drunks, all this other stereotypical stuff that you throw at us to make society not want to help us, because that's really not us, And how else can we act towards you when that's what we get? When you come and not even knowing me, or not even knowing how I am as a person or a human being, not even giving me the right to be a human being and come at me treating me like a dog, we're already homeless, and the little places we do live in kind of feel like a doghouse. The expression slogan, you're in the doghouse, is because you've done something wrong. So we're still feeling like we've done something wrong, even though we haven't. And we have repaid our debt to society. How can we excel if we're not even given the chance to excel? We're not even given the chance to be shown we can excel, because we're still being viewed as the same thing, no matter what you do. So I guess I need to bring that point up. When you repay your debts to society, is it really repaid? Prove them wrong. Not with small, you can't repay a debt with small minded bigotry. Just can't do it.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, Lanny.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So obviously, there's no question whatsoever that everyone has the right to safe shelter. There's no question, all right? That's safe shelter, all right? There's also no question, from where I stand, that we also have rights of property owners within the town of Hartford. And when the property rights of the homeowners and the people that own property in the town of Hartford come up against the rights of people to have safe shelter, that's where we run into this problem at, okay? And I don't know the answer. I really don't know the answer, folks, I don't, okay? But I personally don't think the answer is to infringe upon other people's property rights by putting shelters out there, right? If they offer their property, by all means, I say use their property, okay? But I think we should be asking, okay? And there's also a balance, I think, that we need to take in the town of Hartford between helping and enabling. Because in the town of Hartford, we don't want to become, the only way I could phrase this is a magnet for all of the community of the world that come to us for help. Because we can't provide help for everybody. We cannot do it. We just can't do it. All right. The Haven does a great job to try and provide for people, but there's only so much they can do. The church in Hartford here just tried to have set up to have people, and no matter where you go in the town of Hartford, you've got a NIMBY attitude, not in my backyard. And that's the problem we're facing, because the town doesn't have property. There's no good answers right here in the town of Hartford. And if we keep thinking just about the town of Hartford to do this in, instead of looking outside the town of Hartford, we're going about this in the wrong way. I mean, I don't have the answer. I really don't. But I know that we have to respect the rights to people to have safe shelter, and we have to respect the people that have property rights in the town of Hartford. We have to balance those two. And this board, I don't know how we're going to do it. I really don't. But those are the two things that we have to bear in mind that we have to do for our citizens. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to end comments after Becca here. Do we have any more on the Zoom? No. Okay, good. Okay, so that will be our last comment. Is Becca. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Eric Krause, Hartford. I wondered if the committee or the board had given much consideration to what Burlington's done in. I'm not sure when they did this, but they used city-owned property and stood up an encampment, which I think continues. And then recently, actually, put out an RFP to have someone manage that, basically by facilities and so on. And so I appreciate that the committee has spent time looking at properties. But again, winter's not, it's at our doorstep here. And so it might, a course change might be necessary. And so is that an option? Is that something that's been given consideration? And does it work well in Brooklyn? Might it work well? That's just if it can't be answered now, consider it a report question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Becca White again, and I have the privilege of chairing the Committee on Emergency Shelter. I just wanted to comment on two pieces that were raised tonight. One was the suggestion of what are the solutions? And we presented to the board, this will be my understanding the third time that we've been on the agenda in some capacity. And two of the suggestions we've made so far have been around our RV policy, and in particular, how we can have recreational vehicles be allowed to be on a property for more than 14 days, which currently, once you hit the 14-day mark, as this board now knows, that's when it's no longer allowed under our current zoning. So people can't stay in an RV for that period of time beyond 14 days or more than one next to each other, adjacent on the same private property. So I think what we're experiencing right now is the fact that we don't have any legal mechanisms for folks to find alternatives to shelter. And our current resources, like the Haven, don't have capacity to actually accept these folks. My understanding is they're currently not able to accept any new residents, but that can always be changed. I might be wrong tomorrow. So I really do implore this board, because I feel like we've gotten excellent feedback from town staff. We've worked with the fire department to try to figure out a solution. But what I'm hearing from folks on all angles of this issue are that they want to do something before winter comes. And I realize that that's a risky choice to potentially change our RV regulations to allow for folks to stay beyond 14 days, potentially more than one, on private property that is then permitted. That is the solution that we proposed and that we feel could potentially mitigate some of the situations we're having right now. The other solution that we worked on for the beginning part of the committee's creation was the encampment. We looked at over 120 properties, from my understanding, to try to find a location. That included all town, all school properties, properties with nonprofits. And ultimately, there were issues with every single one of those, whether it be floodplain, too close to residences, not accessible for the needs of the folks who would be living there. So we're just running into all of the same problems again and again. And I think that where we're going to meet in the middle is either the board or the town staff are going to have to be open to a riskier solution than we might normally be comfortable with, which would be, in my opinion, the RV, or reopening some of those town or school properties for consideration for an encampment, or we're going to be stuck in the same exact situation we have for the last 3 winters. And we were very fortunate last year that we had state funding to have folks be housed in motels and hotels. And while, as your state representative, I did ask that we extend it to continue for those 500 plus folks, I don't see where the money's going to come for us to continue to do that, seeing that was federally funded. So we are at a crossroads as a community. And what I've heard from folks is they want a legal option. And I think we have the capability to do that. And I hope that this board will continue to support the work of the Ad Hoc Emergency Shelter Committee and continue to direct staff to work with us to be able to find a potential solution. So thank you all for everything you did tonight. This listening session was very good.
Thanks, Becca.
Sure. And one question for you, Ms. White. If the town authorizes extension of living in RVs for more than 14 days, do you have someone in the community who's willing to donate a piece of property to put all these RVs on?
So I'll just take a step back and say we would be returning to state regulations. So right now Hartford has stricter state regulations. So currently, if you were in Heartland, you could have an RV on your property, 1 up to 3, I believe, for more than 14 days. So we are asking that we revert back to state standards. Where we're having the debate is what like right now, I think the conversation is around fire safety in the public building. which would mean we had to have further fire regulations. So where we're at is we've actually talked to nonprofits, churches, individuals who are interested in being a part of this, but we haven't been able to, you can't like announce a program that doesn't exist. So we've had preliminary conversations with many folks, but have not been able to move forward with that conversation, not knowing if we have the ability to move that solution forward.
So if this board authorized camping in RVs for more than 14 days, would it solve this problem? And would you have private properties that you could put all of these campers on within the town of Hartford? That's the question I have, because I don't think that this board would have a difficulty in authorizing something if you had the further step, knowing that you had some philanthropic person out there that'd be willing to have these on their property. But we can't just give permission to have people in campers for more than 14 days just to have campers end up scattered all over the town of Hartford and in parking lots and outs. We need to have something more than just saying, we're going to give you this. We need to know that you have a place to put these campers. And I would vote for that in a minute.
Great. Well, I thank you very much for that comment. I don't think actually the board has the ability to change the zoning regulations. So apologies. I love your vote on it. But I think it's the planning commission, unfortunately, or not unfortunately, but it is the planning commission. And we have talked to multiple folks who are very much interested in moving forward with this solution.
And I think just to add, Laney, like, I think there's been, conversation and similar questions from folks in the community, right? Of, does this all of a sudden mean that RVs will be everywhere? No, because RVs would have to go through, whatever that process is to be allowed to be there. And we also recognize that it's a very particular situation. And so that would very much have to be a partnership between someone who has that land and access to that land and is okay with having an RV there. So we have had some of those preliminary conversations, and they would have to very much kind of go through the steps in order to have the right appropriate steps to be able to have that RV there. So it's not like, oh, now that if these regulations were changed, then RVs can just appear, that there would be a process in place to have them there and us knowing that they're there and to be able to support the people once they are there.
Dennis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question that I don't know the answer to, and maybe somebody can help me out. I've been hearing that if camps or vehicles or whatever are allowed on private land, that the property owner could be, if there was something that happened there, they could be held liable. And so that would discourage this even further. But I don't know if that's a thing or the truth, but that's what I've been hearing.
Don't know.
Yeah.
Probably depends.
It is possible.
It's pretty easy to become liable for things today. So yeah, I would imagine if folks were thinking that they would allow this on their private land, they may think twice after talking to their insurance company and saying, yeah, you can allow that, but if something happens, you may become liable, maybe. I don't know. Just that's just making things worse. Yeah, thanks.
The comments on the board. Simon, I think we're going to just stop with public comment. Okay, thank you. Good.
Maybe, Ally, where is the RV requesting within, like, what's the status of that?
Yeah, great question. So we are working, I think we're at the place with Tom Peltier, our fire marshal. Sorry, I'm getting my words out, it's late. To specifically kind of work on what a fire safety checklist might look like for the RVs, because it's my understanding that in order to propose it to the planning commission, it was recommended that fire safety checklist kind of be part of the proposal. So it's clear that we've done our due diligence to consider this as a safe option from a fire code safety perspective. So that is still in the works to then be preparing for that proposal to the planning commission.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Good. All right, thank you all for coming and sharing your thoughts, both left and right and in between on this topic. It's still waiting for the solution. I think we have some ideas to hopefully someone can come up with the right mix to make this happen, where we address both issues and make this something that our town should be proud of, so we can move forward. So thank you. Okay. Next up, we have the consent agenda.
Are we going to select board comment?
Oh, yes, sorry, one second.
Okay. Well,
I think in the absence of the chair, the vice chair does
takes-
take
well,
over the role, so,
there you go. Does anybody have any comments? Select board?
Did you step away?
Yes.
I think
For like a second.
We're in overtime, so I don't blame him a bit.
Oh, you know that.
We were like, what do we do, Dad? But you're back.
I'm gonna make sure the water was still okay in the water fountain. It's okay. It's all good. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Okay, sorry. Do we have more select board comments than the ones that we just shared? Or about other topics? Sorry. Yes.
Other topics,
Thank you.
I'm
Okay.
sorry.
It's too late for me. Dennis, go ahead.
Thank you once again. Yes, I have two comments. One is, I was at a liaison type meeting here the other day, and the Teams meeting, I believe it was not going well at all. And I'd asked the staff member, I asked if you ever got training on Zoom or Teams or whatever, and the answer was no. So I'm hoping we're coming into budget cycle soon here. I'm kind of hoping that we can add some money to train our employees on how to use Zoom and Teams or Skype or whatever it is. And so these things can run smoother.
And us too.
And us too. I'm not the one to lead this training. I've never hosted a meeting. I've attended Zoom meetings, but so I thought I'd put that out there as food for thought. And the other thing is I wanted to talk about roundabouts. As some of you know, I talked and talked about having a welcome to Hartford sign in the middle of the big roundabout on Sykes Avenue, at the end of Sykes Avenue. And the state said it was not possible because you have to be able to drive, if a car, say if somebody was impaired and drove straight, they'd hit the sign, so they wouldn't allow that. So now the roundabouts have come into being. And there's a curbing that's probably that high, a granite curbing, that if you run into that, you're going to have some serious problems. But in addition to that, there's a big mound of dirt. And now I see trees in the middle, which they said shrubs, I think, when we talked before about the roundabouts with the state. So I guess I'm just disappointed that the reason that we couldn't have the welcome to Hartford sign in the middle of that was because you have to be able to drive through if you're impaired or lose control of your vehicle, whatever. But if you hit that curbing, that's going to be a showstopper to start with. If that doesn't get you, the mound of dirt will, and then we're going to have trees. I assume they're not very big now, but they're going to get bigger and whatnot. So I just, I really think we missed the boat on the welcome to Hartford sign. I think could have been done, but we were advised it couldn't happen. So
Maybe we need an inflatable welcome sign.
there you go. I had suggested a breakaway one that if you hit it, you know, because
You get a letter.
Well, thinking back further, I'd suggested to put the drive-in sign, if anybody remembers, and that was too big and too clumsy and so forth.
And full of asbestos.
Right. Probably that too. So thank you for that moment.
All right, thanks, Lanny. Anything?
Yeah, question, when are we gonna see Cross Street in Queechee paved?
It's 9:30 at night, and I'm gonna need a little bit more details on that one.
Can you get back to me?
Can you send me and Dan and Joe an email with more specific details on? I didn't even actually catch all the words.
Cross Street in Queechee.
I would need to look into that. I don't keep a running list on all of those things. So why don't you send me and Dan and Joe an email, and we'll get back to you on the paving schedule on that one.
Oh, you
No.
Okay. So I'm here to tell you about the tree board. The tree of the month is a Kentucky coffee tree that has seeds that look like coffee seeds. So whatever, those are planted around town. The key is you have to go and find them. I'm not going to tell you. It's going to be a mystery hunt. I wouldn't mind just saying in public session here that if something, our agendas are packed and so we get through budget season. So if there's something that's going to be added to the agenda, it's going to be added to the end of the agenda. We're not going to bump the things that are already currently on the agenda. And we prefer not to add anything at this point, because as you can see, our meetings are very long to begin with. So I'm just throwing that out there for people that our time is very restricted. And just a comment to the select board that it's great that we ask questions when we get our packets, and I like that we do it ahead of time, but I want us to be sensitive to sort of the micromanagement of the questions that we're asking. We've got the experts in the department heads that most of them have 5, 10, 20 years of experience, and a town manager. So when we get a response from them, we need to just kind of take that response and move on. We're using their time in not an effective or efficient way. We ask such detailed questions every single week about, a $10, a $20 thing that's on the manifest. We have to trust that those people that are in those positions are doing their job, and there's so many checks and balances that those things go through that should not be our focus. We've got plenty of things on our agenda that I think we can focus on. So continue to ask the questions, but let's sort of move our focus off of the micromanagement into the larger questions and the bigger issues like homelessness and the climate change and HCORI and all the bigger things that really are going to impact people in town more significantly. That's all I have. Go.
Just real quick, because this is a kind of a sore subject for some people. The pool, and this is Parks and Rec, I'm liaison for Parks and Rec, has been delayed, the construction. Obviously, supply chain is something because of COVID. The chlorinator, I believe, is stuck in, which is made in, I want to say Central America.
Malaysia?
Yeah, Malaysia. Was it Malaysia? Thank you.
I think it's Malaysia.
I think you're right.
And Joe Major.
I think you're correct. So it's not South America. I mean, excuse me, Central America. So we are looking for other ways, or Brett Loeff's looking for other ways to find one, other alternatives. So right now it is on hold. It will be completed and open on time, but right now it does not look like it's going to be completed by the end of November, which it was scheduled. Or to November, not the end of November. I'm sorry.
Sounds good. I had a school board meeting the 9th of September. Just some quick updates. There were student representatives. They were in their 3rd week back, very excited to be back, especially the performing arts, because they can actually have some in-school performances. Their fall musical is Cinderella, and they're practicing on that. And athletics, very excited about the return. They can even have a small student cheering section. Superintendent is excited to have people back. He mentioned there are lots of retirement and turnover in his office, so there's going to be some transition and hiring. They still got their mask requirements, and that's about it.
And the football team is 3-0.
Nice.
Can I add, this feels a little more like commission reports than select board comments, but
Thank you.
which we weren't really doing, but did the school board discuss this community meeting that is scheduled for tomorrow?
I think they discussed it to the extent that they were announcing, they made an announcement there about it.
Well, I mean, here's the thing, like I don't see the agenda on the school district website, but I think there is supposed to be, do you know about these?
I believe they invited all of you to attend just as other elected bodies in the community, but I haven't been able, I mean, we're deep in budget, so I haven't been able to
I'm not,
dig in
so
on it.
I'm just saying, like, I would like to use this opportunity to tell community members to attend, because I know that the last one that we had, it was not well attended. So I hope they're doing some outreach, and I'll try to do that as well. But then I'll also mention, because actually we still have about 15 attendees, which is impressive at this time of night. But so I'm also going to take this opportunity for anyone who is still watching, that we have a number of committee and commission openings, including the 5th Charter Commission. There's an opening on the Hartford Committee on Racial Equity and Inclusion. There's a couple others.
Preservation.
Yeah, so basically, if you go to the Hartford
Town and
School Committee, if you go to the Hartford website and go to employment/vacancies, there will be a list of the committee openings, and we really value those volunteers on those committees. So, and come to the the school committee, school community meeting tomorrow has also to do with the equity, like the strategic plan or writers are facilitating that meeting. So there is some equity element of the school community meeting.
So I put it on my calendar for 6, but I don't even know where it is.
I think it's at 6 o'clock and it is either
Here
or Zoom.
Here.
Or both. I mean,
I think
it's
it-
hybrid.
I think it might be in room 2, like, yeah, it's hybrid here in town hall and on Zoom as well.
Lena give us the room.
Okay.
The room assignment.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, I was hoping to give more detail on that.
Okay, good. Thank you for reminding us. Okay, so next up is.
Are we doing committee too, or just select board
It's not on the
comments?
agenda.
No, it's not on the agenda. I was just confused because I remember what the tree thing was. So I thought, since I can never remember what it was, I was gonna say it.
I just didn't have anything else to say.
Okay, so I'll hold my
Hold
committee
your thoughts.
report for the next meeting.
Thank you, Dennis. Yeah, thanks.
Okay.
So we'll move up to consent agenda.
Is it me?
Yep.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that we approve payroll ending September 18th, 2021, approve the meeting minutes of September 7th, 2021, and approve the AP manifest of September 17th, 2021, and September 21st, 2021.
Second.
By Kim, comments, questions? Hearing none, we'll call the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Unanimous, perfect. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
by Ally, perfect. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Excellent. Thank you, folks.
Oh, yeah.